Meeting to order. This is the September 20th meeting of the Planning Board.
Here. Member Savage. Here. Ted Cruz. Here. Member Smithmeyer. Here. Member Fox.
Here. Okay, have a quorum. We'll open the meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the August 16th, 2023 planning meeting to make a if anyone here 10? Yep. 103 Old Loudon Road spoke to the October 18th meeting. So again, if anyone's here for 103 Old Loudon Road, we will not have that issue tonight. So we'll move into the design review applications by consent. If anyone's here for items 5A through 5H and has questions regarding that application or have concerns about that application, if you could make yourself known. If not, I'm going to pull 5A from the consent agenda. So we'll be handling 5B through 5H. Would someone like to make a motion to approve those applications with ADR recommendations as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 5A, with the record, Gregory Sturgis requests ADR approval for a 12 square foot externally illuminated blade sign at 5 Pleasant Street Extension. I just want to call out, don't have a problem with the sign. ADR didn't have a problem with the sign. Sign's already up. I don't think the applicant's here. No? So we'll make a motion to contact, or I'll contact Nyopco Signs, tell them they were roundly discussed at the meeting, but I don't have any issues with it, but I did want to pull it off just to make a motion, or make a, what's that?
Is that a table?
No, not a table. I don't have a problem with them. I don't have a problem with it. I do want to ask Code to maybe, ask staff to contact Code to let them know that they have to wait to get approved before they can put the sign up.
There's
a fine, too.
There's a fine, yeah.
Oh, good,
Suzanne?
I hope they get one, because they should know better.
They should. Well, Nyopco does know better.
Yeah.
So,
there's no excuse,
Yep.
as far as I'm concerned.
okay. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve 5A as submitted with, again, the note that Code will be talking to the applicant regarding putting a sign up.
There was an ADR condition on that approval,
There was an ADR condition. What was the condition?
that there be no illumination.
There is, and geez, I want to say I thought there might have been illumination.
It does say externally illuminated
But
application.
Okay, again, so recommendation to Code for enforcement is to make sure that there's no external illumination, and again, just a notice to the applicant that they can't put it up before.
I think it's internal illumination that we don't permit. External illumination means that you have a light shining on the sign.
But I think, did ADR say they didn't want external illumination?
The motion from ADR was no illumination. I think if we could look at the minutes, I think it went back and forth, and the representative said they're not sure which way they want to go, and the ADR recommended their approval without illumination of any kind.
So,
Okay. Matt?
so in a few weeks, it's going to get dark at 4:30, and they're going to be trying to
So
run a business,
Yep.
and they can't light their sign.
I'm gonna change my motion to table it.
may I
Yes.
speak? You might want to check, I think I don't know that their hours go to dinner.
They usually don't. They usually
That's
run
why-
out before.
that's
Maybe that's why they don't care.
Yeah.
Okay.
But either way, I'd not like to approve it with a bunch of conditions, so.
So,
Oh, sorry, Mr. My only concern is, are they gonna continue to be fined if we
Right.
table this?
That was
Or
my
is it
question.
stop tonight because we're choosing to table it to get it sorted out?
I agree with that.
I would recommend that you vote to approve it, subject to the other things, but with allowing external illumination if they want it.
Do we have them go back to ADR to approve that external illumination?
You don't need to do that.
No.
I agree with that, Heather.
I'm fine.
Okay,
I'm
so
fine.
I'll amend I don't know if I got a second, I think I did, but amend my motion to approve it with the sign as submitted with the recommendation that if they, code's gonna talk to them regarding, and if they do want to put an illumination, they don't have to come back.
Second.
All right, so motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, we good with that? Sorry.
I would just,
Yeah.
and the reason I support that is because there are tons of banks downtown that have
Yeah.
their signs
Yeah.
illuminated, and
Right.
they should be able to.
Well, there
to
was
do that
another
if
one
they-
that's
There is
in the,
one.
there's another one on Main Street.
Yeah.
Indigo Blues has
Yeah.
got illumination.
Yeah.
It's in the consent.
Okay, brings us to a public hearing section of the agenda, design review applications. Could we read items 6A into the record?
Victoria Poland, on behalf of Stephen Dupree, requests ADR approval to install a Concord coach exhibit onto the sidewalk in front of 45 South Main Street. We pulled this from consent so that you could discuss it, because it is a council item and it's very visible, it's in the public right-of-way, and there were a lot of ADR comments. ADR was generally in support, and I think that the applicant was in support of everything ADR said, so there's a lot of agreement all around.
A lot of agreement all around.
Correct.
Well, that's always a good
Oh, we
thing.
hate when that happens. What would we talk about?
Welcome to the table. If you guys could state your names for the record.
Especially for this guy.
Victoria Poland.
Steve Dupree.
All right, tell us about this project.
The only thing, the only comment we really have, we've got engineering's comments about layout and the tight space. The only column, ADR had some good suggestions. One that they wanted, which we would strongly recommend we not do, which was the internal roof drain. So as originally designed, the enclosure has a scupper. It's a flat roof. It's being put on impervious area already, so it's not increasing any water flow. Warren Street designed it with a roof scupper coming off, so the water, if it rains, will come down the face of the glass. And then remember, the area around there's all got heat, so it in the winter melts. In the summer, obviously, we don't have it on. ADR suggested that we put an internal roof drain and then bring it inside the column, go underneath the structure, underneath the pavers, and then have the outfall in the hill between the Smile and Love Your Neighbor building. And the engineers and architects strongly recommended against it because they said that will freeze. There's just no way to get that deep enough to get it below the frost level so that when that water's flowing at an angle that it won't freeze. So you're gonna have a roof drain that in all likelihood will freeze on top of the roof and cause bigger problems. So that's the only, and we didn't know that because Victoria and I came to architectural design review and we didn't bring the architect, and we went back and said, let's get rid of the roof scuppers. It's a tremendous idea because it, it's just this little scupper is a little drain and doesn't look all that attractive, although not unattractive. And they just said it's just not practical unless you're gonna heat that pipe, because otherwise you aren't gonna get it deep enough to work. But other than that, it looked good. We're sort of cart before the horse in some ways because this is all contingent on us getting signage acceptable to Gibson's. Why is this coming up now? 10 years ago, when we negotiated the lease with Gibson's, we did, even though we took 2 parking spaces and we built it anticipating a coach, we didn't leave a specific right for us to put a coach there that could impact his visibility. His lease is up for renegotiation. What an opportune time to bring up the issue. Michael's been very good to talk to, but his big fear, of course, is visibility, because this will block some visibility of his entrance. And I won't bore you with the economics of bookstores. So if the planning board likes this, we're then gonna go seek variances for appropriate signage. If we don't get those signage variances, then this project's not gonna move forward in this place. But I just wanna make sure everybody understood that. What didn't we tell them that you did all the work on and no?
Signs?
We're not doing signs right now,
No.
right? So, yeah. We've got engineering's comments, we really, we'll get I know Aaron Lambert and Wilcox and Barton are working on surveying and trying to figure out, there was never as-built done of the area, so trying to make sure the box doesn't interfere with utilities, doesn't interfere with the ADA access at the tilt down. There is one to the north there.
Is that heated under there?
It's heated everywhere except where we anticipated
Yeah,
the coach
okay.
would go. It was literally Carlos and I out there with the city engineer walking it off, and I'm not sure our approximation of how big the box would be 10 years ago is right. If anything, the box enclosure is bigger
Yeah.
than the unheated area,
In
so.
unheated area, okay. And on the signage, I was looking at the application, and on the signs, wouldn't it, I mean, you're hindering the view from street view on the north access. So if you're coming northbound on Main Street, you will be hindered there. Wouldn't it be smarter to put well, good or bad, put the sign on the side of the building that would show from the north?
You trying to get shot too? That reminds us of a long discussion we had at ADR, and we're trying to work our way through that.
Okay. So this isn't on the table
This is
now.
just to show you the
This is-
enclosure. This is
so
ADR of the
If
enclosure.
you do this, then we gotta do
You're
this.
right, and
Okay.
we did show signage to ADR, and they had some good feedback. We've sort of had to be the ambassador back to the tenant, and we're working our way through that.
Okay. Earl, did I see your hand?
Just going back to the drainage, please. So is it glycol that we put in to keep the site, that you put in?
Yes.
All right, so what you're saying is the roof drain, if there was something to be extended, would be below that?
Yeah, if we put an integrated roof drain, it
Yeah.
comes down, you know, you have a flat roof. From pedestrians, it's a flat roof, but it obviously has a shape to it, to a drain on the roof. ADR said if you're gonna do that, bring that down in one of the columns so it doesn't stand out.
Right.
But then when you get under the enclosure, where's it gonna go?
Gotcha.
So it happens to be a gap that we put between the Smile and the Bindery building. The idea is, okay, we'll angle it out and put it down on that lawn area. I'm not sure, that's a great idea, but you'd have to get it 5 feet down.
Okay.
Or more to get it below freezing. And the other issue is the interior will be heated to some degree, so it shouldn't freeze while it's in the column, but once it hits that ground underneath, it's gonna be so far below the heating system that we have in the sidewalk. It's
Okay.
probably-
So the roof, as you got it now, will be not drained?
It will have a scupper, just basically on the edge, and I was worried about that, cause I go, well, a scupper, we're gonna dump the water, and they've actually got the scupper, so it just extends over the edge, cause their idea is to have it literally come down the glass. It's just like rainfall, and then it'll go out into the heated area.
Jeff?
So I'm glad you mentioned that this was a city council issue, because my first question is, you as the applicant coming forth in the right of way to put something up, well, I think it's a great idea. I do question the need for the bollards. I mean, the clock tower doesn't have bollards, the artwork out there doesn't have bollards. It's just gonna hinder snow removal and the ability for people to walk in and around there, especially ADA. Do we really need the bollards there?
Well, there isn't snow removal, cause we heat it and do that for the city there.
But there's still
Yeah.
roadway.
There's roadway.
Snow plow, whatever,
Here's-
I'm just,
Yeah, our concern was there are two things. The clock tower is farther back from the traveled roadway. If you look at this rendering, there's not a lot of room. I'd like to move the enclosure back to the east a little bit, but we have to be very careful to maintain ADA and plenty of access so it doesn't become a choke point like you have at the clock tower and two Eagle Square, where it's a tight little area to get around there when there are people sitting on the wall. So we've got limited room to move there, so we're kind of out close to the sidewalk. The other problem we have, I mean, hindsight's 100%, we took 2 parking spaces to make this bump out that weren't in the original Main Street plan. Hindsight is we probably should have taken 1 more space that's there towards the chamber, towards the south, because as you see that rendering, look at the parking lot line. Somebody can park a car there and they will, they're gonna obstruct, I mean, the base of this is gonna be 3 or 4 feet, but they're gonna obstruct a good part of the view. So our concern was, you know, you get somebody who drives up over the curb and they hit that. We don't have, you know, if you look at the clock tower, each of the corners are almost 2.5 feet high. The granite corners, we don't have that. I mean,
I'm just
I just
curious.
don't wanna lose a coach, and the city's investing $100,000 in this project. We're putting in almost 200.
Yeah, again, I'm just concerned about ADA access, because you put a bollard in there, and you gotta have at least 5 feet, give or take,
Right.
for maneuverability around there. Are you still gonna have that? And I'm concerned, looking at this, that you're not going to have
Yeah,
it.
it's a good question. On the highway side, that might be tough to achieve, given the room we have.
Right,
We've
and,
gotta-
and to be honest with you, as far as the parking space, I'm not really worried if a car driving down the street can't do rubbernecking and look at this when there's a crosswalk right there. I'd rather have them get out.
Me
and
too.
look at it from the street and
Yeah,
not worry
yep.
about that parked
Yep.
car, to be honest with you. I hear what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
applaud it. I like the idea of doing this out there. I think it's a great thing for the city. It's a nice entry on that end. Just,
Yep.
let's make sure, and the other thing I have to worry about is your below ground. There are a lot of underground utilities out there. Is there any possibility, if we have an issue with below ground, putting the mechanical up?
Well, the first design looked at that, and we do not want like a roof-mounted thing. You only have to look at some of the redevelopment projects, you know, when Elm Grove did their apartments over and put, you know, and then 30 of those roof-mounted units. So you would only want a roof-mounted one if you could enclose it. And the problem with enclosing it is you're gonna need a
Understood,
rooftop structure
right.
that's 5 feet high, and all of a sudden that band becomes a very dominant feature. So we switched and put them underground. Yes, we know there are a lot of utility issues, and like we say, the maps are challenging. I think the city's designation where the utilities are on the pre-construction plan are pretty accurate. And we did go through there and put that snow melt system in.
Right.
So, again, it was 10 years ago, and my memory's foggy, but I was out there, and
I
but we're
remember,
gonna have to be very careful.
I was
Yeah,
with MJ back then. I remember
yeah.
the utilities and having to move things
It's a
around
little,
and drainage.
it's a
and-
little nest of problems.
Yeah,
there.
and that's my only other
Yep.
worry is like, you know, do we have an option? Is there room down in that alley between the two buildings at all to do anything and come up under the
No,
sidewalk?
You know, again, hindsight's 100%. We have lights and cameras down there, and we have to have full-time security there at night because of the homeless issue. And the gap that we put between there and the empty Menino apartments has unfortunately become a trouble there.
I'm
I
just
wouldn't
trying to,
dare- Yeah,
if you, it's great you've thought of these options. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
you know, because if all of a sudden you run into
yeah.
some major utility
Yep.
that's got to be moved, I mean, the cost of this will go
Yeah, our
skyrocket.
backup option, if we found out that we couldn't put it here because we don't get signage that either works for the tenant or because of the access issues around ADA and fitting in there, you know, we've looked for other possible locations. I mean, another possible location is Eagle Square, perhaps. There's some issues there, as you can imagine, and utilities there.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're trying to make it work here, because, and the city's given us a draft license to put it there, and we hope it works.
Alec?
Just for some context, the bollards were a comment from our maintenance department to at least place them on all four corners. It was a concern that they had, and that was a suggestion from our maintenance department.
Right, but they were probably thinking right at the corners, not out on the street.
Right, and then additionally, a lot of your points kind of reflect some of the staff comments where we really need a site plan to, you know, see how it interfaces with everything.
You mentioned 4 feet up. What's the height to the bottom of where the bottom of the wheel's gonna be?
I don't have the architectural drawings.
Okay.
But
I mean, it looks like it's maybe 10 inches or so, or,
it's, no, it's gonna, so we've been going back and forth. Part of it depends on how far down we can dig to put the heating cooling unit.
Gotcha.
You know, there's a clearance, and until we figure out exactly where the utilities are and how deep we can go, that's gonna determine how much of it's underground.
Okay.
The goal, if you look at the drawing, is to have it as close to the ground.
Yeah.
Now, we got one comment after ADR saying, you're making a mistake, you should put it up higher, because people driving by, if there is a car parked
Well,
there,
that was-
aren't gonna see it.
that was, I mean, you said it was gonna, you know, if you're gonna be
So I'd like to
obstructed by
go
that.
up higher, but then a problem I've got with my tenant is going, you're already blocking complete view of my windows, are you trying to, you know, put it to me? And that's why I said, well, no, we've got this great sign option, and it's like negotiating, the Balkans.
Yeah, but if you're already doing it, it's not gonna hurt it to put it up another foot or two, so, okay.
That's my view, particularly with the user.
Yeah.
If we do get a variance to put the sign that solves your problem, then visibility isn't an issue, because you've already conceded that we're taking care of it with a sign.
What about signage or not wayfinding, but is there gonna be anything
Yes,
with a,
yes, we're gonna, like I have on all my other projects, Liz Hengen's gonna
Placard.
do a history, we'll
Yeah,
put them
okay.
probably inside the enclosure, they aren't shown there, we're trying to debate whether you put it on a ground-mounted pedestal outside, but that then has maintenance issues.
But you have to have the ability for Braille or some other, if you're providing something. I know they can't visually see it, but if they still can
That's a good question, that's one we
for
haven't thought about.
Les. Yeah, I just know that comes up in some other
Right, although
communities
this is
I've
a
worked in.
private, I mean, the city's contributing, but it's privately owned.
I wanna say they might have done something on the one down at the end of Center Street, for the old train station, that's addresses visually.
Yeah, I
impaired.
think
That
there
was
may
an
be
app
on
or
that
a-
one,
or a-
and,
Or a QR code or something.
yeah, I can't
So would
something
know.
up at the courthouse
Liz
too.
would know, because she did that one.
She did that
too.
one.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, just
Yep.
coordinate with her if there's something that can be reasonably done, so that
We want
we can
everybody
get
to
more
experience
users,
that
yeah.
Concord was an industrial hub of northern New England.
No neon signs or anything on the ballards, on the
Well, you know,
banner around the top.
not to
I'm
read
kidding.
Yeah, we're
the
not gonna
history,
have a
but
banner
remember,
sign on the
after
top,
the
right?
State House, the most photographed thing on Main Street is the Bank of New Hampshire stage
Yeah,
sign,
that's
for the
true.
record.
That's true.
We had long fights.
Other
about
questions?
discussions.
Suzanne?
I mean, just looking at the plan, it's very forced, because you're trying to get Bigfoot into a small shoe.
Yeah,
And I'm concerned about the space, like, I imagine, like, a field trip with a bunch of kids, and then they wanna go around it. I worry about the visibility with the crosswalk, cause there's so much going on, but there's a couple of pinch points there that I think are very difficult, and I don't think it gives the feature, the space and the it looks like there was no place else to put it, so let's just put it here. And I
Yeah.
think it needs a better location.
I'd like to put it right out on the plaza that the city owns in front of the State House.
Well, that's probably not the best place for it either,
Okay.
but how about in their yard or something? But
Whose yard?
maybe, so what I'm thinking is, did you ever think about pushing it so
State
that
House. State
you were
House lawn.
closer to the building, where the bike racks are, and that people have to kind of walk around it?
Well, the city's easement, so that's private property, and if you walk down there and see the orange dots, that's not city property, it's private property out to the orange dots. And we gave a pedestrian easement. I'd be
That's-
delighted to push it back, but then the city has a walkway that doesn't go straight down in front of those buildings, you gotta go around. Now, I don't object to that at all, but I don't think that
It
was
just doesn't
preferred.
belong there, that's what I look at it, and as a feature, it just seems very forced, and aesthetically, it doesn't belong there. Now, I don't know what the solution is, but.
The chamber, of course, loved the idea of having it there, cause I think it's a draw.
Why can't the chamber have it right in their building?
It's
Well,
inside.
first of all, I own that building, there isn't enough ceiling height.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to cut off the top half of the coach.
And then where
It's
would you
almost,
put the
it's al-
moose?
it's almost, what, 14 feet high, or 15 feet high, and our deck to
Yeah,
deck
but
is
you wouldn't have
13.
to have it in a box, it's still 15 feet high?
It's, it itself is 15, we're about 13, it's a 12-foot, it will not fit in the building.
Okay.
There's no place for it in the chamber space.
It just seems like it shouldn't be there, it should be
But again,
someplace else.
the appeal is having it outside so people see it, and again, you
Right,
gotta
but they're
protect.
gonna wanna walk
You
around
gotta
it, and
protect
I
it.
think
I
that
don't
they're,
disagree, I think that you brought up a good point of walking around it.
you can't easily without
Is there any
falling off
way
the curb.
for the city council to give them the ability to push it back farther? How much farther do you think you could push it back without really causing a pinch point? 5 or 6 feet?
Ooh,
Not even
there's not 5 or 6 feet, and then keep an ADA width, but on a straight line. If you pushed it back to where the John White sign is, that raises another issue, because we're supposed to
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
that there, but assuming we found another place for that. I think there'd be room for the sidewalk to come around the front, but that's,
then you've got,
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's all
Well, you don't
kinds of issues.
have to necessarily have to go around the whole thing, but this makes it, I think, very dangerous, because you've got, unless you were to take that whole space, I don't know, it's like, there seems to be a lot going on here, but it's a big thing in a very small space.
I see another hand.
Yeah.
Council Chris.
So if you were to move it, now you're violating the 3 lanes of the A, B,
Right.
and C lane of
Right.
the sidewalk, correct? And
yes.
just one other question, this looks the same from the left as it does the right, correct?
Painted the same way all the way around.
Thank you.
It's the twin, so when Merrimack County Savings Bank bought the one that the Coach Society has, both of those were owned by Sutton Marshall, my good friend North Conway has a lot of them, and I got first pick. One. And it was made by Hanson Wagon Works, the Hanson, out in Oklahoma, they do all the high-quality reproductions. And I have access to a number of authentic coaches, but the problem is they're worth $350,000, and you'd need much higher level of humidity and moisture control than we're doing.
I saw one in Wyoming 2 weeks ago and it was yellow.
A lot of them are yellow.
Well,
There's
Bill
one out
Cody,
at the
yeah.
Crazy Horse Museum.
Yep.
Because they were the exclusive provider of the Wells Fargo stagecoaches. I mean, it was a big deal.
Okay.
What, I don't know if engineering can address this, but, or maybe Steve, you can, but the sealer that needs to be applied on porous surfaces, brick and granite, to assisted cleaning and protecting those materials, we're just talking about the granite that's on the outside of your enclosure, right? Not the sidewalk.
Right.
Okay.
That was a maintenance comment, and yeah, it's just to protect against any graffiti. Yeah, it's assistant cleaning.
Any other questions or comments? Any member of the audience have any questions or concerns about this
We're
application?
trying to share something with you.
Oh, okay.
Technology.
Thank you.
I'm not allowed near any.
Those are the same graphics.
Oh, that's
Same
different.
graphics you
Okay,
have.
so that's different than what we got. We got.
Yeah, those are
Yeah, they suggest-
incorporating.
In the ADR, so you see they wanted black
Yeah, yeah.
because it matched the windows. An interior light, we're still working on how we light it. That's just showing the juxtaposition of a sign if it were south face mounted. And then there's another rendering that shows how it would be if it were blade sign perpendicular, I think.
Would no bollards be a better,
What's that?
would no bollards at all around the outside be better? I mean, again,
I mean, if you-
it's not protecting it, it's, car's gonna go right through the bollard or right around it.
Well, no,
On a granite bollard.
granite, they'll knock them over, depending on the side, they could
Right.
crack them and, but I mean, if maintenance is worried about it, that particular view really doesn't protect the structure all that.
Show that view,
Much.
if you can
Heather,
show that
could you go
view
back?
again.
Yeah.
This
So,
is
I
a
mean, if
very-
you're coming north or
Because
south.
right now, you've got too much space. If you have more than 6 feet between those bollards, a car could get in there.
Yeah, that's what
So
I'm
if your
saying.
issue is a car,
It's
you're
a
not.
northbound car that all of a sudden veers over is gonna go right between those two bollards.
If maintenance is more worried about their equipment, then I would say you're putting more of a tube style on each corner, right up tight to the building.
You're not sitting in the right seat, so I can't recognize you. Go ahead.
I just
sign
want to
in.
say, that is a nice graphic. It's attractive. I don't think it bears any resemblance to reality. The closest thing that we have to reality is this plan right here, which shows this box right here is where there is no heating system.
Correct.
So you can see from this graphic, and I'll go in just a little bit closer so you can see a perspective. Okay, a few things I want to point out here.
Oh, there's a fair amount of room around it.
The corner of this piece is right up against
Yep.
this area, which is not the case in the photo perspective
Right.
that you saw.
Just
The
because
bollards-
that's, because that one, when we designed it, we put it lengthwise. If you look at our coaching closer, it's more the other axis.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
the bollards, if you look at this plan view, would be probably located like where I would recommend is that you would put one here and over here. Reason being, yes, kids are going to want to walk around it, so don't you want the bollards on the outside of the kids walking around it? So that they're at least having that protection of the
But,
bollards.
I mean, why wouldn't you put the bollards out as close to the street as possible?
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Right?
saying.
Oh, okay.
But
I
if
just-
Close to the street as possible,
Right there,
so that,
okay. And then
so
right
that
in
you
the
have
corner-
the children inside the
Yes.
bollards. I think in terms of ADA, the purpose of the ADA is to walk like this. It's not blocking that, even though this is uncomfortably close for movement around. Staff is in support of the bollards for all the reasons Mr. Dupree wants them there. That's also why we want them there. I think having them outside is as far outside is beneficial. But also I'd like to point out this strip over here. This is where the brick is and where he's got planters, right? This distance from here to here is approximately 8 feet if we assume that these slabs are 4 feet of concrete, which they usually are. So if we extend that over to this area and we see that this line, we can almost just sort of see a little bit, it's not dimensioned, but it goes to around here. So in my opinion, looking at this, there's at least these bit of feet that it could be shifted back and be consistent with this linear path, which does feel, in my opinion, a bit tight, which is why I always try to get Mr. Dupree to put his planters in the brick area and not on the concrete.
My concrete,
But-
my concrete, my concrete.
But it's the same, it's even more space here because the building is set back.
Yeah.
But you can see from a linear perspective that we don't have a measurement, but we need the measurement, but there is a few feet here that it could be shifted back to be aesthetically in line with this area. I don't know about who owns what or licensed this or that or the other thing, but from a design and functionality perspective, there is some feet there that I would say, yes, you can move it back a few feet.
And we're happy to move it back a few feet if we can keep a straight walkway there. If you walk down there, there's a series of orange dots, so it was by accident at the time, but you remember, some of you may remember, we built these buildings. Concord usually requires you to put them on the street face. We asked to put them back because of the scale and the size, and it turned out to be a godsend, because when we took 30 spaces away from North Main Street, engineering had to come up with makeup spaces, and we were able to put more spaces down at this end. So we gave the typical pedestrian easement the city has, and in fact, some of the city's furniture is on our property without a license, but we've been good about that.
I block all those discussions out of my memory from when we did that.
Yeah.
Councilor Pierce.
How difficult is it to move those ballards? I get a little nervous when we start moving stuff that was embedded in Main Street when
Are
we
they there now?
redid it.
No,
They're not there now.
They're not there now?
not there
Oh,
now.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
if
the
we-
answer is really easy, they're not
Yeah,
there.
our sliding back will it will impact the snow melt system, but we're gonna have to dig up those stones anyway and redo it. And again, when we designed it, you know, this was Carlos and Steve and Severino out there with a spray paint can, and we thought we'd put it north-south, and the way the box is designed, it's more on the other axis. So,
So
we're gonna have to
have you
redo that.
looked at placing it this way instead of that, instead of the way you got it? The alternate, you know what I'm saying?
No, but we
I mean,
could.
again, you're going, if you then move it
And then
more to the
slide it
middle.
back and then put it on the north-south
Yeah.
axis.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
You tell us what you'd like to do, we're just
Well,
trying to put a box with
yeah.
a
Jeff?
bunch in it.
So I see what Heather's saying about the dark line if you extend it across, but if you also extend the storefront to the right over, the storefront on the left actually sticks out more by a couple feet. So if you move the building back, you actually do pinch it a little bit more on that left
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying, if you turn the whole box,
Yeah,
so
it's-
the rectangle's front to back
Yeah,
instead
give or
of
take.
left to right.
That box that's drawn there is
Very tight.
roughly 21 by 13.
You know,
And
I
you're
have no idea.
19 by something, so if you flip that, it's gonna be a little smaller in length.
Right.
And
But it gives you the more room.
It does, but you're talking 20 feet front to back.
So it's
I have
seven.
an idea.
What do you got?
We're here for the architectural design review, what the enclosure looks like. If you guys are good with that, or we make any changes to that, once we have that and we know the dimensions of that, we'll go out there and we'll use, before it snows, and we'll use orange tape or red tape. Once we have the survey done and
Box
we
it in.
know exactly where the utilities
yeah.
are, because that's gonna be impactful, that may prevent us from sliding back. Once we have that done, and that Bartlett and Wilcox and Barton are working on that, we'll mark out those utilities. We'll go out there and mark out the box a couple different ways and work with the staff. I mean, I don't care whether it's perpendicular to the road,
Yeah.
it's parallel to the road. I think a lot of these issues you can best adjust just by looking at them in
So-
the field.
Is there anything that you need from us to go to city council as far as encroachment into the walkway?
Before we can, I've got the draft license, but before we can finalize the license, we have to have the dimensions. We don't have the dimensions till we know where the utilities are and the final layout. So
Okay.
we don't need anything from you on that yet.
Okay.
We just want to make sure that on the design part,
The
we're
design part of
okay.
it, you're solid.
And then, I'm happy to mark it out and have staff say, push it back, move it forward. The key is finding out where the utilities are and getting an actual sort of as-built, because that's gonna be the first guiding principle.
So I haven't seen the dark image before, but I do like the dark one better than I
ADR
like
suggestion.
the light one.
We agree.
And
Where is
and
an ADR?
the reason you're putting the corner units in and not making it
Oh.
glass to glass, and the corner units look fairly substantial.
Yes, we were asked to beef those up. They were thinner originally, and ADR's suggestion was we change the color to black, and that we thicken up the columns to make it look more substantial. You call, we haul.
You call, we haul. Yeah. Suzanne, I saw your
Yeah,
hand first.
I think we should just either say we like the enclosure or go to that route because,
Yeah, there's all kinds of things
yeah,
that
I mean,
are still need
they might
to
not
be
even
determined.
get whatever they need
Right,
from city council.
Right, yeah.
And at which point, they could come back
Yeah,
and
good point.
figure it out. But in the meantime, I would be thinking very creatively about where in that space where people can actually view it safely, and then there's the traffic thing and the crosswalk and yada,
Yeah,
yada.
good point. I don't know, I
Duct
mean,
tape,
visually, I don't know what the extra heavy edges add to it, other than make it a little more substantial, but I don't know if you want it to be more substantial. You almost want it to disappear.
Well,
I saw
that
it-
was the first try in
Yeah.
the architects, but I think it was almost unanimous at ADR that they wanted the enclosure to, first they wanted black because it matched some
Well,
of
I
the
get the
window
black,
deals,
yeah.
but then they wanted to make it look more like it wasn't just sitting out in space.
Okay, yeah,
Well,
okay.
some people might not agree with them.
Yeah,
I don't agree with ADR almost every trip.
Jeff?
I just have one question. You said the scuppers are designed to run down, you said the
What's it?
scuppers are run down the face of the
Yeah,
enclosure, but what's shown in the drawings we have is the scupper sticking out and dumping the water out directly onto the
yeah,
sidewalk.
yep, it comes, and we're gonna pull that back so that, cause I asked, I said, okay, if we have scuppers, what happens with the water? And he said it's gonna come right down the face of the glass, right down the granite, and then go right onto the,
Yeah, I just wanna make sure it's not gonna be one of these that
no,
somebody
that's a
dumps on
spout that you
someone,
can,
or
right,
there's an
the homeless can
icicle
use as
that.
their shower, right,
Yeah.
yeah, no.
I
Trying to
see
avoid
another
that one.
hand. We'll get moving on here. Okay, let's move on. Let's close the public hearing. Thank you very much, guys, for your testimony.
Public comments?
Mr.
Oh,
Chairman,
yeah,
before
public
you
comments.
close-
We leave the public, I asked for public
Yeah, you
testimony
did.
before.
You
I
asked.
did.
Sorry.
You did.
I
did.
Just double checking.
So we'll close the public hearing, and again, use our, use the information that was presented to us tonight as our determination of finding a fact, the reports and the information from staff, as well as the materials that were provided by the applicant. So 3.2 in your package is to grant conditional ADR approval for the Concord Coach in front of 45 South Main Street, subject to ADR conditions and the following conditions noted below. Yes.
I have some rewording if you wanted to not have them adhere to the ADR
I
recommendations.
would love some rewording. Be great.
I would say the board granted conditional architectural review approval for the Concord Coach display in front of 45 South Main Street, subject to the following conditions noted below. Precedent conditions to be fulfilled within 1 year and prior to issuance of building permit and endorsement of the final plan by the planning board chairman and clerk, unless otherwise specified. Item 1, precedent condition 1, address all planning comments to the satisfaction of the planning division. Address engineering comments to the satisfaction of the engineering division. Necessary licensing through city council shall be in place and fully executed. Darker colors are used for the framing. Final placement and orientation of enclosure to be subject to staff approval.
Perfect. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have to add one. So the planning comments include the ADR recommendation to have the scupper removed. So you might
Or
just
the-
say,
not
with the
removed,
exception
With
that
the
the
exception of the
scupper is
scupper
permitted.
being
Right,
permitted, yeah.
correct.
Okay. I'm not gonna be able to remember all that, so I'm gonna,
I move what
Yes.
he said.
I move, we've got a motion to grant ADR, conditional ADR approval as outlined by Alec, with the conditions that were outlined. We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? No, sorry.
I do have a question.
Yep.
So they're gonna, this whole location that we've all been discussing here
Yep.
is gonna be up to staff?
Well,
So it's not coming
It's
back to
not.
us?
It's gonna be up to wherever the applicant finds they can fit it in. If they can, and again, with the idea that we want it as far away from the street as possible and not interfering with the the ADA accessibility and the walkway designs. And yes, I think staff can,
I
handle.
still have concern with the bollards, because if
Yep.
you place bollards more than 6 feet apart, you're getting no protection from a vehicle, if that's the point of it. And if
don't
you
know
put them
that it
6 feet,
is.
it's gonna look
Yeah.
like a fence.
yeah. Okay,
So at the point,
We'll
that's
take
my
it.
only concern, is that if staff
Okay.
kind of think about that with engineering, that if the point of the bollards is protect it from vehicles,
Yep.
it's not. If you want it for maintenance, then they should be closer to the 4 corners of the actual building. Similar to when you put like a bollard next to a gas meter on a house, you put it
like
right
they
next
have
to
it
it.
at the clock tower, right on the corners. Good point. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the,
Can I just say
Yes.
one thing in response to your comments, Jeff?
Oh, sorry.
That we haven't approved the location, like, we have comments, engineering
No, I
and planning
understood.
both have comments pertaining to the bollards, and we haven't said, they haven't shown what we've said. So part of the approval is to adhere to the staff comment, so there'll be more discussion about that, is all I want to say.
And it
Okay.
will be part of, if I may, it'll be
Yes.
part of the license agreement too, on the location.
Well, I think ultimately there'll be a graphic probably
Yeah.
as part of this agreement.
Approved by the council.
Okay, that was 7F, right?
A.
That was 7.
Item 2.
Item 2. That was 7A. Let's move on to 7B. Warren Street Architects on behalf of Delta Dental. Could we read that into the record?
Note that
Oh,
is
that
a
was
motion
7A.
to,
That was
so
6A.
staff is, you need to make a motion to postpone that to the
Sorry.
October,
Yep. Okay,
October.
on behalf of
18th
the
meeting.
applicant has requested a postponement to the October 18th meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to
So moved.
uh, push that off? What's that?
Sorry, Dr. House.
No, you're good. Motion, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, so we'll move on to 7C.
We are,
Skip 7A?
Kidding.
this is,
Oh, that's,
Am I out of order?
In the, who motioned? You missed it.
this
Counselor
guy.
Pierce, sorry.
No, 7A.
That was 7A.
that was 6A.
That was
on the
6A.
agenda.
That was 6A. Sorry, I
7A
saw
is
Victoria
another
Pollard.
Dupree.
I'm sorry, Victoria
7A is
Pollard.
another
Oh,
one.
another Dupree.
They're back to back.
That's the courtyard by Mary.
I got you. Two signs. I'm sorry, so we're on 7A, apologize. So we already did 7B, so we don't have to come back to it. So let's read 7A into the record.
Victoria Poland, on behalf of Stephen Dupree, requests ADR approval for a conditional use permit for 2 signs proposed above the top row of windows or on the wall at a height in excess of 25 feet, including a new 41.8 square foot internally illuminated wall sign and a new 69.02 square foot internally illuminated wall sign at 70 Constitution Ave in the Opportune Corridor Performance District. In conjunction with this application, the applicant is requesting ADR approval for a 12 square foot internally illuminated monument sign. Let me just demystify this a little bit. 2 of their signs needed conditional use permits because of their height, and the other was a regular ADR sign. So ADR was approved quickly and unanimously approved all of them. They just happen to need conditional use permits.
Okay, and they're existing signs just being refaced, right?
No, well, they're,
shrinking.
it's a branding change.
Shrinking.
So,
Branding change,
yes,
yeah.
some are being removed, some are being, just changed from
Jeez,
green and
look at
red
this
to black
little
and white.
Baby entrance sign,
I know,
okay.
it's so small.
If you could state your name again for the record?
Victoria Poland.
All right, tell us about this.
So this is a project that we're completing down at the Courtyard Marriott, which is 70 Constitution. And we're just redesigning it per the franchise rules. Currently, it has the green and red courtyard signs that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and we are looking to change those signs to the black and gray, which I'm sure you're also familiar with. Those are the redesign of the courtyard. And to do this, we need to get new permits for each of those signs that we are replacing, and then 2 CUPs, because 2 of the signs, the one on the east and the one on the south, are 25 feet above grade. And those signs are they're being replaced with letter-based signs, and and they're black and gray.
And you gotta be, the number 5's gotta be not proportionately correct, because it looks like it's a little teeny sign sitting on top of the,
It's only
of
1,
the,
3.
of the brick monument. Am I seeing that right on your packet?
It's only
Number
What's 5'8"? Yeah.
only
it's
1'3".
Number 5, the proposed sign is a teeny little sign.
The entrance sign?
Yeah,
Yes, it's just a directional sign, just to
yeah, but it can't be that small. I
indicate
mean,
the entrance.
It's,
1'3".
it's 3.2 feet by, by only a foot?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
The existing was 2.5 feet tall.
right. So it's half the size. Even, it looks even smaller than that. Okay, either way, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, any discussion? Jeff?
I just have a quick question, because I guess I was kind of confused, because you're saying the branding is changing from the green and the red. The image of the entire building looks like the entire building color is changing. Is that happening, or is that just the way the rendering happens to show it?
We're changing the building, which was approved.
It might have been
I think that
a
was in
meeting I
June.
missed, so I'm just,
I'll clarify. We don't regulate paint.
Yeah.
So they're not changing
No, I
anything
just-
except the paint. You are correct, the entire
I
building's
just was
changing.
asking the question. I'm not saying
Yep.
we need to approve it, I just was
No,
trying to
no,
understand it,
I'm just
that's all.
clarifying for you. Yes, they're changing the entire facade. We don't regulate those things. They did receive an approval because they added a portico share and that needed a building permit. So they received an approval for the porte cochere.
And it's gonna be the same gray like on the signs, so.
Yeah, no, that's, it just, like I say, just threw me off with the rendering. I just was curious, that's all.
Okay, other discussions? Earl?
Is this a branding change for the entire Marriott family?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Gonna spend their money on something, right?
Our money.
Well, they got enough from me.
Any questions from the audience regarding this application? No? Close the public hearing. So in your packet, again, using the items that we've been presented with tonight as our findings of fact. 2.2 is to grant ADR approval for the signs as submitted. Would someone like to make a motion?
moved.
Second.
Was there any public comment?
Yeah, nope, I asked.
Oh,
What are you people not paying attention to when I talk?
evidently not.
I'm paying attention, Mr. Chair.
We got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 2.3 is to grant the following conditional use permit approval in accordance with section 2869B2 of the zoning ordinance to allow for the signage to be placed between rows of windows at a height of over 25 feet at 70 Constitutional with the Constitutional Ave, subject to the following conditions, and those are outlined in just condition A. Would someone like to make a motion to grant the following condition, grant the conditional use permit as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You guys are all set.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're gonna skip 7B again, as we did it before, and we'll go move on to 7C, if we could read that into the record.
Warren Street Architects, on behalf of Concord Coalition to End Homelessness, request an ADR amendment to their previously approved major site plan for architectural changes to the existing building at 120 Pleasant Street in the institutional district.
Okay, could we get a staff update on this?
They appeared before the ADR committee, and the ADR committee noted it was unfortunate, everything that had transpired, but they were in support of all of the recommended changes. Not unanimously, but the motion did pass to support them, to support all of their requests.
Okay, if you guys could state your names for the record?
Hi, Scott Donovan with Warren Street Architects.
Mark Fagan, Concord Coalition.
Karen Jansen, Concord Coalition.
Thank you.
So, in short, as Heather said, we had a few, I guess we'll say, unfortunate events where we had some additional removals or demolition work take place, and we needed to regroup after that and determine how we could keep the project moving forward.
Scott, you don't have these available to show on screen, do you?
No, I don't. But there are some images.
I just want to see if we could have folks
Yep.
at home see them, the millions at home that are watching. So these are primarily photos of the house as it sat prior to demolition, right, I should say?
Correct. Great, perfect. So what you see here is the elevations as it stood before demolition. And I can explain the handout in just a moment. So you can see this, again, this was before demolition, and this is what's being proposed after demolition. Or after the, as the project progresses. So some of the things that were talked about that are the changes being made, which we discussed at ADR, was that the cupola here, as you can see on the carriage house, and the two chimneys came down during demolition work. And in an effort, there was some discussion about putting faux chimneys back. And I think it was pretty well unanimous that putting something back to make it look like something that was there was probably not the right choice at this point. And those chimneys were taken all the way down to the basement foundation. So to rebuild a whole chimney for a fireplace that would never be used just wasn't feasible. So that's two of the major differences on the outside. The other key discussion was about the windows, and that's what I handed out tonight because the contractor was able to scramble a little bit and find some trim work that we're going to propose to use around the window openings. To your point, what you see there is some photographs of what the existing conditions were. I don't know when this was done, but has been that way for quite some time now. At some point in time, when a renovation took place, all of the wood trim, including soffits, fascias, window trim, even the head of the window where it looked like it had some type of architectural molding, was all wrapped in break metal aluminum. So what was there under the aluminum, we don't know. But we would like to try to put something back that is architecturally pleasing. So what we're proposing, and you can see from those existing photographs that everything is wrapped in a gray break metal aluminum flashing. On the last 2 pages of that packet, you'll see what the contractor is proposing. What we'd like to do is take the window, we can actually have a casing applied to the window in the factory or, while they're being fabricated, and that would be what we use to replace the windows. Then on the very last page, you can see a prefabricated head molding that we would also propose to use for those windows, and that's the one that's bubbled on that last page.
Okay.
Any questions there?
So white vinyl?
Right now, as you can see from the existing photographs, that everything is that gray color. The building itself will be entirely in white trim and white vinyl siding, along with the black shutters, which will be put back, also a request. As far as the window color, it would be something similar to what we see here. The exact color hasn't been determined yet.
Okay, and you're gonna do all the windows with the, that lintel over the top? You got enough room under the, I guess there's no porch anymore, sorry.
Yes, all of the windows on the main house will have this detail.
Okay, and then the windows on the carriage house are, no details on those?
Correct.
Okay. Council Pierce?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for all that you do in getting housing out there for the folks that need it the most. But I sort of find myself in the position of looking at these plans as I would any other developer or any other applicant.
Yep, as you should.
And I was out there today and sort of walking around the building and looking, and I do see that there are some openings left for the cupola and the chimneys. And you mentioned, sir, that the chimneys, came down during demolition. And were they supposed to come down in the first place?
No.
Okay. All right.
I don't think a lot of things were supposed to happen in the first
Yeah, I know,
place.
I was trying to remember the history. It was during my hiatus.
Your
When
hiatus.
you guys were in there something else. But, yeah, and so you're proposing in this, as I read, not to put in chimneys and also the cupola, and I understand that was in really bad shape,
Correct.
but the original plans said that it would be replaced, did they not?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, just, I don't think, they said they'd be replaced. I don't think anybody assumed
Expected it to
they'd be
come-
taken out. I mean,
Right.
it was just like the
Yeah.
front porch and the
Correct.
cupola and,
And
you know, again, what we heard for testimony, just so we're back on the record again, what we heard for testimony was lead paint and deteriorated quality of wood caused a lot of that to be removed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct, and, you know, I'd like to add too, the chimneys,
Karen, if
when
you
they,
could just pull that mic a little closer to you, thanks.
the cupola was pretty riddled with lead paint and it was rotting. But in addition to that, when they were doing the removal and they got a little zealous, but the chimneys were also filled with asbestos, so it was kind of an over abatement, maybe?
Over abatement, go with that.
Okay.
And again, the argument, I'm reading the ADR minutes and going through, you know, I get it. I mean, if you put a cupola up or you put chimneys up that aren't gonna be reused, does that affect the interior or the finish work or the quality of what you're gonna have for a product inside the building?
Yes, well, there's two things. The chimneys, a faux chimney is gonna have, it just doesn't seal as well. And so you're gonna have a lot of ongoing maintenance with that, which is an added expense. On top of that, by doing this, we can take the money that we can save from putting these architectural features up that really don't affect, I mean, you can't house somebody in a chimney, you can't house somebody in a cupola, but we can put the funding into the interior with more sturdier, say countertops or flooring or things like that. It's just a better distribution of the funds, given what we have to work with at the moment.
Okay.
It's worth mentioning too that, as many people may know, that when you do an architectural project, many of the renovations fall under a certain category. Because so much demolition work was done, we, instead of being a quote-unquote renovation or a minor alteration, we had to bring the building now up to current codes, which really impacted the structural side of things, and we basically had to reframe the entire project. If one were to go over there now and walk through, we'd see enough new wood that probably could have built a whole nother structure.
So it's been a little while since I was over there, and I know you had framed up a whole bunch of windows at a much smaller, are you reframing those, or are you bringing those back to a more standard size? I think they were like 3 by 3, I mean, they were teeny, some of them were just little small windows.
Yeah, no, the proposed window opening right now, as it stands, is about 4 inches narrower and about 4 inches shorter. And that was to get us to a standard size window that's out of a catalog and not a custom window on every opening in the building.
So 2 inches on either side, 2 inches on top of bottom?
Correct.
Boy, it looked a lot smaller to me than, I must have seen something on the end of the building on the Liberty Street side. It looked like there was a window that had 4 or 5 pieces of wood in it that brought it way up in size. Either way, so we were put in a tough situation, and you know, what we approved originally was the outside of the building's gonna stay the same. You know, we went through all this with Jonathan when he was here a couple months ago.
Yeah.
You know, we wanna have something there. I mean, we can't leave it as it is. It's deteriorating now, opposed to the elements, winter's coming. You know, we kind of pushed you back and said, hey, you know, we want you to succeed, we want this to be a successful project, but we need it to fit into the neighborhoods. We want it to be something that isn't this eyesore and, you know, just a terrible looking building. And I think you've come as far as you can get, as far as, I mean, we know, do we want cupola back? Yes. Do we want the front porch back? Yes. Do we want, you know, the chimneys back? Yes. But realistically, they're gone, and putting them back in, I don't know that it's realistic. So I just wanted to let you know that my thoughts on that. Suzanne?
Well, of course, I disagree.
I'm sure.
So someone made a big mistake, and no one's taking accountability for that. But, you know, I kind of feel for the neighborhood, and I kind of feel for the understanding that everybody had was, oh, this is no big deal. And then, you know, I kind of feel that's one of those things where they say, well, what are they gonna do? We're gonna knock it down. What are they gonna do, make us rebuild it? And so it's kind of like when you put your sign up early.
Yeah.
You know, and you say like, oh, it's gonna cost us so much money, you know, to like redo it. But one of the things I notice is I think it's a shame that you didn't put the porch on. Because I think for all the said and done, you've just basically done kind of not what you, all the fun things about it, the things that made it different and fit into the neighborhood are gone. I think the chimneys were lovely, but if they're not being used, so they're gone. I don't know why the cupola was a big deal, because no one's gonna touch it as far as the lead paint. But that was probably not even a concern of the demolition crew. They just said, let's just do it. I would feel better if you at least made that effort to do the porch. Because I think that when I'm looking at this, it kind of looks like, you know, a subdivision house that has no detail to it at all.
You're talking about the front porch?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually approved to be removed prior.
Right.
Well, now maybe you should have it back.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing left.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
There's no, you know, you can't go back to.
Oh, yeah, they did.
But the.
There's supposed to be something else. I don't know.
The other thing, Suzanne, if you may remember, Greg mentioned that if it was a porch, it also, without a porch, that the amount of stuff that piles up on the porch would be less desirable than we would think or want. If I remember correctly, I remember Greg mentioning that the stuff that would gather on the porch and not so much the maintenance, but the policing of the porch of the residents and stuff like that. So help me out if I.
It won't be a porch that people will sit on. It'll have people's belongings and backpacks and bikes, and it would not fit with the neighborhood. It would be
But
very
I thought the
messy.
neighborhood, I thought that the intent was to keep the porch and the chimneys and the cupola.
Originally, the only thing we sent them back to ADR was the cupola and the chimneys. Those were the two.
And the windows.
Well, it's
And
kind
the
of- I
windows,
mean,
and the
yeah,
window
window
size,
trim.
and the lintels around the windows and the.
Well, maybe you can make that front door not have that thing on top of it. No, I mean, it's lost, I mean, I.
It's lost its charm, there's no
I feel really
question.
bad.
Yeah, no
But there
question.
has to be something that you can do, you know, to make it not look like it doesn't belong there. But, I don't know, that's a sad, I mean, it's sad that you can't put it on a porch because you're afraid of people using it like that. Anyway.
Anybody else? Jeff?
I just have a question. You said the windows are only 4 inches shorter and 4 inches narrow, but when you flip between your proposed and your existing elevation, it looks like a heck of a lot more in size. It looks like we're losing like a foot in size. And so I'm just trying to understand if something's changed between these elevations that we've got existing and proposed.
Oops, sorry, I just.
Gonna be the shutters?
Now, it's,
These windows are way smaller.
yeah, the other ones seem significant. When you count the number of clapboards, kind of lines from the bottom up.
Oh, you didn't do that, did you?
Sorry.
I think visually, those windows that originally went from the top of the porch right up to the,
I'm just
Soffit.
trying to visually understand.
Yeah.
I understand if you change it a little bit in size to try and get something standard, but if you're losing quite a bit of size, it's just one more change visually, that if all the other neighborhood houses have those large style windows, it's starting to look more commercially to me and less
But again, you go back to
residential.
a non-standard window, it's gonna cost exponentially.
That's what I'm saying, if you can
Usually
adjust
more.
it a little bit,
Right.
within, a few inches here and there to get,
Yep.
but if you're changing feet,
Yeah, I don't think it's that big, but it's pretty good size, yes.
I agree, I have that perception about the windows, but I'm also looking at, it may be a little bit of an illusion, because if you look at the drawing where the windows look so huge, the porch roof is there,
right there,
and it
yeah.
really takes up a
Yeah.
lot of space.
I'm looking at the
And-
east side, like, is up there, so you don't have any other visual breakups, but.
Did I see your hand?
I was just gonna say, part of the thing with the windows is not only to keep them standard, but it's energy efficiency and to meet code and for a safety factor to come in a little bit smaller. So what we're trying to do is visually enhance the windows with the trim that's around them.
Okay. And I want to pick up on what Suzanne said about the cupola and the lead paint. If I'm not mistaken, abatement has to be the property. So it's not the fact that nobody's going to touch the cupola. It's got lead paint on it. It's got to come off.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, other questions? All right, we'll send you back. I think, any member of the audience wish to? Yeah. So why don't we send you guys back? Thank you for your testimony. We might have you come back, so stand by. Come on up. Hi, if you could state your name for the record?
Certainly. My name is Fred Hagedorn, and I live just about directly across the street from the property in question at 4 Liberty. I can tell you that the window sizes have reduced by at least 6 inches in height, maybe closer to 8. My wife on her phone has pictures throughout the demolition of what the size was and what they are now. If you want to look at them at some point, you may. But I don't think that's germane to this particular topic, other than I just want to be factual with you. When I was at the zoning board about this project, I was concerned not about having the homeless transitional people in my neighborhood. That's not my concern. My concern was that we had multiple Section 8 housing on this one block, and I don't see a plan across the city as to how Section 8 housing is being distributed. And I was concerned that we were starting to have more and more Section 8 on one block in the town, in the city, and we're not making sure that it goes around the entire city. And so one of the members of the zoning board voted no to the variance because of that particular argument, saying, you know, you're right, we don't have a plan. But the zoning board of appeals or of adjustment made the agreement to approve it, and I understood why, and I don't have an objection to that. But I'm trying to explain to you where my first thoughts were on this project. But one of the things that was discussed there and in subsequent meetings with the city was that the look and feel of the building would be maintained. That yes, they were going to have to do a lot of work to make it safe, but that this was part of the neighborhood. And I'll remind everybody that the building was built before the IS zoning section was created. It was part of the same group that my house is and the houses further to the north of it are. It will given the proposal that is before you today, it will no longer fit into that character of house. It is a gateway house to our neighborhood. It is the first thing you see from Pleasant Street. I'm about to do a very large renovation of my house, and we're working very hard to make sure that we keep the character of the house the way it is, externally, because we think that's important to the value of the homes of our neighbors. The Concord Coalition for the Elimination of Homelessness has chosen to have a building that's in a particular neighborhood. That building should meet the requirements of, and the structure and the look and feel of that neighborhood. This planning board put those requirements on the contractor, on the owner, and on the architect. And everybody has decided to ignore it along the way. And now they're coming back and saying, Mom, I'm sorry I broke it, but it costs too much for me to fix it. Please, can I have a pass? In my house, that never worked. Didn't work with my parents, didn't work with my children. If you break it, you fix it. You pay for it. If you choose to accept the ability to buy a house in a neighborhood like this, then you have to make sure you present a building that fits the character. It's a cost. Now, I understand about the porch. Thank you for arguing for it, but I actually understand why it's gone, even though I will miss it because it was a beautiful farmhouse porch looking out over the vista. But the look and feel of the house is being destroyed. The windows really should be bigger, and I really don't care if they're not standard. That was the character of the house they bought. That was the character of the house that they wanted to be in, because they wanted to have the homeless group in a neighborhood and be distributed across our city. And that's good. We should do that. We should try and get people into neighborhoods so they can adjust and move forward. The chimneys coming down, the contractor should be paying to put the faux chimney on the roof. They made an error. They took it down without permission. That's their cost. If the owner feels like they can't afford it and all this other stuff, then they should look at their contractor and say, you screwed up, cover it. And the cupola, which is another ability to have the house look like it came from the 1880s, should still be there. Now, I understand the wood was rotten, but in the June meeting, the Concord Coalition, through its representative, agreed that they would put a replacement on that roof. And now they come back and say they can't afford it? I'm sorry, that's not okay. That is not okay. And that is not what I expect this planning board to accept, because you've already made adjustments with them. You've already agreed to exceptions for this project. And now they're coming to get more because they had errors or they came across surprises. But it's affecting the value of my home. It's affecting the value of the other homes on this street. The character of this neighborhood is changed by this decision. And we shouldn't be allowing that. If they had torn it down and built a new one, we all would have been there saying you have to keep the same look and feel of the neighborhood when the design came forward. They chose to renovate. That was a choice. It's turning out to be more expensive than they had hoped or planned. But that's reality. If I have a problem with my house in the renovation I'm about to do that I got my building permit for today, thank you very much to whoever approved it. If we have a surprise, guess what? I have to pay for it. I'm not going to be able to come back and get permission to fix it, to get an exception. I strongly urge you to please stick with the June agreements and have the windows be a size that looks like it fits in the neighborhood, that it's part of our neighborhood, that at least the pieces on the roof line looks like it's part of our neighborhood.
So just
It's not a lot.
From a structural perspective, again, if they did rip it down, what you're seeing here is something that would breeze right through the planning board as far as approval. So we would look at this as a new house, new construction. We're not going to tell them that they need to put a cupola up. We're not going to tell them what size the windows are. We're not going to tell them they need to use chimneys. There's some restrictions and there's some governance pieces that we'd follow, but the argument that they chose to renovate, they didn't mention anything about cost being the issue. They mentioned that if you take the cost and put it into items that are chimneys and cupolas, that's going to affect the product quality of the materials inside. So
Well,
I don't want to argue the points, but
Then I will simply say that I think that the neighborhood was not on the whole, happy to have this happen. But a number of us have agreed that it's not a bad thing to have distributed opportunities for people to make transition and to have housing when they don't have housing already. And so we're not fighting that battle. But we are saying that the look and feel of our neighborhood should not be negatively impacted by these decisions. And we feel like at every turn, the city of Concord sides with the owner and with the contractor and not with the residents who are paying many more dollars of taxes. And we find that to be quite disturbing and disappointing. And so I leave you with the request that you please seriously consider not accepting their requests, or at least hearing what I'm saying and coming up with something in the middle so that the neighborhood can feel a little bit better and can feel like the front door hasn't been painted an ugly color. And by the way, it was not, the house was white before they took everything down to gray. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Do you mind signing in if you did not already?
Yeah, sure. Okay, sign in. Anybody else have any questions or comments about this application? I can't see. No? No. Okay, why don't you guys come back up? Yeah. Thank you again for testimony. Okay, so again, for the record, we did receive public comments from butter Mr. Macris with signatures, and we'll make sure you guys have actually, it's in the packet, so you guys have copies of that. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, including Mr. Macris, who signed it. Again, you know, you can see what's in the note there, but it's, again, the 2 exterior chimneys, the cupola is restoring and replacing windows to their original sizes and placements. So, again, we're back at the crossroads we were at previously, you know, where we were originally versus where we are today. And I'm struggling with it as much as I did before. Matt?
I have a few questions. I'll start with this one. When you mentioned the chimneys, you're talking about the interior of the building. Help me out with my ignorance here. Could you just put a fake chimney on top of the building and not have anything inside to satisfy the external, concerns of the neighbors?
Yeah, when the faux chimneys were discussed before, that was the thought process.
'Cause I heard
that
two
it would be
things,
from the,
right?
it would be from the roof
Right.
up.
Brick?
Yeah.
No.
No,
Okay,
it
so
would,
I guess-
I
it would
mean,
be,
It would be, a wooden structure
veneer,
that you would
right.
put there, and it would be a veneer.
Right, and which, yeah, I don't think that brings it back to where it was. I'd rather see no chimney than that, but I see a hand,
I
yes.
just for clarification, like, what you were asking about I think you were asking about like the leakage and
Yeah.
internal
Yeah.
problems. So, I mean, it'd have to be attached to something, so it's not like it could sit on top of the roof shingles, it'd have to go in to
And
the
flash it.
building to connect, and that's where
That's
the
where it
problem is.
So that
So, it's not just sitting on top of the roof and there's no drainage issue, it's actually going into the building to connect to other things, and that's where the problem is.
But that wouldn't have anything to do with the space for additional countertops inside.
Right, no.
Councilor Pierce?
I'm really struggling with this. And I think I said it before, I certainly appreciate everything the coalition does for the city of Concord and those that need the housing the most. But I think back to, we saved a 270-year-old house in Concord because the developer thought it was too much money to fix it. And that was probably 5 years ago. And we made it as a condition for occupancy that the house be brought up to date. And this is a little bit different because that was demolition by neglect. That certainly isn't the case here. But I think we need to hold the coalition to the same standards as we have done other applicants. You know, mistakes were made, we understand that, but I would like to see a faux chimney. I would like to see the cupola back. I think, well, I will just leave it that I'm gonna have trouble voting for this when we get to that point unless I hear something different.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my other question is more of a bigger concern, because I appreciate the work you're doing, and it needs to continue if we're going to solve the problems that we have in Concord. But if this project doesn't go well and the neighborhood can't buy into it, how are we going to convince other neighborhoods to allow a similar situation if it changes the character of the visual character of their neighborhoods? Because the goal would be to increase the amount of this type of housing citywide, not concentrated to one area of the city, downtown, but to sprinkle it out. So that's my bigger concern, is how we're going to get more buy-in if this neighborhood objects, because it drastically changes the visual appeal of the neighborhood. You don't need to answer that, that's just it.
No, feel free though if you'd like to.
You know, I appreciate that concern, and I think that there are multiple ways that we can go about working on solving the homeless problem and spreading out where we're putting people. And there are a lot of options to do it, not just with renovating multifamily homes and working with developers. So I think what you're asking is actually a more complicated and bigger conversation than of how we're going to go about doing this and working with developers.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we are able to do more of this.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
The challenge we have here is the excess demolition and the requirements to bring everything up to code were very significant costs. And we have had to eat those costs, and we're trying to manage the cost of this project so we can get it completed in a decent way for the people who are going to be living there. And believe me, we'd love to have cupolas there, and we'd love to have chimneys, but at some point in time, you only have so much money, and all this money comes from government funding. We are not a bank, we don't have reserves, and this is a lot of money to an organization that lives from year to year on donations and grants that just provide enough to provide services to people who really need services. And I understand, I live in the neighborhood, and I live in a historic home, and yeah, we'd all love to live next to a beautiful historic home. Mistakes were made here, not by us, we're not the contractor, we have worked with the contractor, but at some point in time, we get to a point where we can only afford so much. And these changes are important in terms of the finances of the project.
So is there any recourse with the contractor?
We have negotiated with everybody and come to a settlement, but and when something like this happens and you're up against time, there's only so much time you have because of the limitations we have in terms of getting the government funding. We don't complete the building by a certain point of time, we lose that funding and the building will not be completed.
Okay, so we got three issues. We've got cupola, chimneys, and window sizes. And you guys went through architectural design review, you heard public testimony, you've heard testimony here. Any movement on any of those from your perspective as far as the layout and what we see in front of us?
The windows are important that we keep them what we proposed, and I believe that what the differences are in terms of what was there and what we're proposing. Scott's information is accurate. The chimneys, the ongoing maintenance, I think, is very concerning to us. The cupola, if we had to put that back, I think we would certainly be more than willing to do that.
so we can put the cupola over in one column and the windows and the chimney in the other. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking
Yeah,
to say, hey,
we understand.
how do we get through this? And again, the conversation that we had back in June, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but I guess it was in June, was just that, which was, okay, you know, this is where we are, how do we get to the finish line? And again, I'm not in the business, I'm not a developer, but I don't wanna see a building sit there, you know, not finished or, you know, struggling to get to the finish line. Did I see your hand? No? Okay. Suzanne?
I just think situations like this, though, I don't want to use the word embolden, but it becomes something that people will say, well, look, I got away with that. You know, but I feel really very sympathetic to the neighborhood because it's like they were expecting something else, they were willing, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. And it's your neighborhood. I mean, I would feel, you know, I have like one old home next to me and then the cemetery, and if someone said, oops, now I'm gonna have to put like a ranch, you know, or something else, oops, I didn't want this big house. So I get it, and there's a lot of sympathy for the coalition, but it shouldn't have happened. And I think if it can happen once, it can happen again. And when are the neighbors ever gonna believe that the word, I mean, it was said, we're just renovating it, and now, you know, I'm like, I feel for the neighborhood and for the future, because there's opportunities similar.
But again,
no one's gonna see it.
we don't see it, I've never seen it happen this way. I mean, not to say it's not gonna happen again, but I haven't seen a project take this type of a turn, again, in my tenure, as far as dealing with the projects that we deal with. You get what's presented is usually the way it works, right?
What about Abbott Downing? That
Well-
had a lot of hair on that one.
Yeah. Abbott Village, good point. Other comments, questions, concerns? Amanda?
I do think that it sets a precedent, because as Earl even said before, and the person that came and spoke up for public testimony, is what would have happened if it was his house, and he had some changes, and he had to come back in front of planning board? Would we be granting his,
Right.
Variance and/or change in his design? So I have to think about that, because it does set a precedence no matter who's in front of us as an applicant. I also know that, accidents happen, and there's change orders, there's contingencies, and all of those things that happen that become a responsibility. And it said that you negotiated that with your contractor, but I do have to say there should be some ownership, and it shouldn't be all on the coalition to have ownership of those expenses because of someone else's mistake. So I'm sorry that that's happened. I hope that there is a better way to find a solution for mistakes made that were not you, because you weren't out there doing the demo yourself and made the mistake. It was the trust that you had in the contractor to do the work, and the mistake was made. So the ownership, in my mind, should be on them. But that's my perspective, because at this point, we're setting a precedent for other applicants, as much as, and when we were here in June, I really did wanted you guys to be able to continue, because I understand those deadlines that are set. It's either, if you don't meet that deadline, you lose that money, and that's not something that you guys have already this deep into the project don't want to lose. So it puts us in a really hard position, because I definitely feel for you on that, because no one wants to lose that funding, because then it puts you guys in a deeper debt position than you're probably able to take on. So, I don't know, I mean, just had to say, yes.
Yep, no, thank you. David?
Just to voice my opinion, my biggest concern, and this is in no way reflects upon the respect that I have for what you guys do. I get that part, and I understand the costs. But when this project came to us I feel that we approved it based on a certain criteria and expectation. And I am very sympathetic with the gentleman that got up here. I think he explained the sympathies of the neighborhood, and I think that needs to be respected. I feel bad that you're stuck. I think that, having been in the construction business for a while of my own, I understand cost overruns and issues that are beyond your control. But I had subcontractors too that worked for me, and I held them accountable. And I held them at one point to a lawsuit, and that was the way it had to end. Unfortunately, he was fired off of my project, but he also was held accountable by the court. I know that's time consuming, and I understand all of the objections that you have, and they're legitimate. I want you to, I'm trying to be sympathetic to you, but I have an issue also with the windows, and if I had to give up something, I would give up the chimneys and ask for the porch. But, that all being said, we approve something. We have to, as a board, we have to have the respect of the public and the confidence of the public, that when we make those decisions, there's an accountability. Unfortunately, it's fallen on you, but I think that ultimately you need to get a harder chunk of or a harder bite into your contractor.
I mean, I don't think this is the venue for a discussion about what took place, but I do just want to mention that mediation did occur and multiple entities were held accountable financially. So
Not enough though.
but, well, that's up to the mediator to decide.
I know.
So, but I don't want people to think that nobody's being held accountable, because that did take place and multiple entities were held accountable. So I just want to make that.
And last point is, I agree with Suzanne in that the front of this house now, in my rendering, it's not very attractive, and it looks like a row house, you know, in a development, you know, that we approve all the time, and it would fit there. It does not fit in that gentleman's neighborhood.
Other comments, questions? Okay, so again, I want to reiterate, we're looking at three points here. We're looking at the windows, we're looking at the chimneys, we're looking at the cupola. You're confident that, Scott, you're confident that it's a 2-inch, and again, visually you look at it and you've got the lintel across the top, it's 6, 8, 9 inches tall, there's casements that are 4 inches or 6 inches around, there's a base. And
We actually had conversations with the contractor, and those are the measurements that
So
he gave us.
glass to glass, you're 2 inches narrower, 4 inches narrower, top and bottom,
Correct.
side to side and top to bottom.
Correct.
Okay. So again, here we are. And I get the precedent piece, I understand the coalition's side of it, understand holding people accountable, understand the whole shebang, but we need to either approve it or deny it, based on what you've seen tonight. They're willing to concede on the cupola, put a cupola back, not gonna be as ornate as what was there. I think Jonathan said they'll put a cupola back that's a substantial cupola, but again, I don't want it to be just a box, but a cupola of some sense. How do we get past the windows and the chimney piece? Close the public hearing. I did.
Oh, you did?
No,
I
I
wasn't
didn't.
listening.
I will close the public hearing.
Yep,
So
I
let me
was
close the public hearing. We'll send you guys back. Thank you very much.
See, a reminder once in a while doesn't hurt.
Your reminder.
So, we could give conditional approval, is that correct, based on what we decide on these 3 items?
What do you mean conditional approval?
Well, they're asking to change the plans, correct?
They're they're coming back with the plans that went to ADR, ADR approved them.
Right,
They come to us for a final vote,
right.
and either we can accept ADR's recommendation and approve them as submitted, or we can make changes to them. We're not going back and opening
Okay.
up old cans of worms. That's really all that's in front of us, is
Well,
what
I think
was-
there are worms all over
Well,
the
there are,
place.
but I hear you, but what's in front of us is just the pieces that we asked them to go back to the drawing board on from the June meeting. Am I incorrect?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I just had, oh, you're calling on me?
Yeah?
Okay. My point is simply that we remain consistent, that we don't vote in favor of something because we like the cause, and we don't vote against something
Right.
because we don't like the applicant or the application,
Right.
and maintaining that.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think some of us are struggling now because we appreciate the work, but I don't think that really can factor
I mean,
into our
I
decision.
can't, you don't have to go far back in history to remember the Warren Street gas station and the arguments and the pieces around that to say, let's do something because what's there now is terrible. We're at the same point. I mean, if you don't approve it, what are you gonna end up with?
Right.
If you approve it, what are the conditions to put on it to say we're gonna approve it? So, and that's where we're at. I mean, I don't know where to move from there. Suzanne?
Well, everything that was supposed to be there is gone, so there has not been a real accountability to anything that the neighbors thought was gonna happen, or even the board. Cupolas can always be put on later. Chimneys, I think that's irrelevant, but I think what would really make a difference, and I didn't realize the porch was off the table, but the thing that will make a difference is the windows.
Yeah.
And I just, this is not a good compromise.
Okay.
Just
Yes.
if I can add, as I said, I was out there today, and the holes are in the roof, and they are shingled around them for the chimneys and the cupola. And they were taken out all the way to the basement. So there are holes in the roof, so if we don't go with a cupola and a chimney, they need to put roofing up there and,
Well,
Sure.
I thought they didn't want to do it.
well, all I can tell you is there are holes there. I don't know what went on behind it, so.
What's that?
Let me just clarify.
Yeah.
That what you see there is existing. No roofing work has taken place yet.
Yeah, those are.
Oh, okay.
Those are the
So
holes
those
that
were the
were
holes that
left.
were
Yeah,
removed.
those were the holes that were left.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a way to frame a motion that you basically is like, as presented, I would vote against it, and if there's another option that they would come back? I mean, it's not our job to necessarily redesign it, but there has to be some benefit
What's-
that is visible.
What are you asking for? What, I mean, is it?
Something that had some big, much more of an impact, which is the windows.
Okay,
I would like to make a motion.
Yeah.
And then just to get it going.
yeah,
Open to amendments.
open to change.
I would make a motion that, that some sort of chimney, faux or real, built all the way from the basement, be rebuilt and the cupola be replaced. So, and I would leave it at that.
Just for the record, so your motion isn't to build a faux chimney all the way to the basement?
No, however
Okay.
they decide,
Okay, a
faux
faux chimney
chimney
that comes
being
from the roof line,
acceptable. Yes.
from the
Yeah.
roof line up?
Right.
And cupola?
And the cupola to also be replaced.
Okay. We have a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? Jeff?
I still have an issue with the windows. The plans, when they scale, don't scale 2-inch and 2-inch.
Okay.
And I'm concerned that the
So
difference.
as a compromise, if we take Earl's motion with a caveat on it that says that based on the fact that it's 2 inches narrower and 2 inches shorter than the windows that were existing,
To meet a standard size. I'm
standard
acceptable
size,
to that,
would
'cause
you
I
approve,
understand,
would you appeal, would you be okay with
Yeah,
that?
I like the
Okay.
idea of the chimney and the cupola.
So make a change to your motion. don't.
No,
yeah.
no, he
No,
can
other
add an
comments or
amendment.
questions?
I
We
would
can add
amend
that
his-
as an
You would
amendment.
amend it, yeah.
An amendment, okay. Any other comments or questions regarding
We
that?
need a
Are
second.
those the same size windows that were there?
2 inches
I
narrower
mean, I'm
and
fine
smaller.
if, like I say, if the windows are like a 3'2" and a 3-foot window is a standard to make it cheaper, I'm fine with going for a 3-foot. But if the existing window's 5'10" and you're going to a 4'3" window, I'm not comfortable
No,
with that.
but
And that's kind of
it's-
what it's scaling at on these plans they presented.
Yeah.
And that's my concern. If
Okay.
you actually had something in front of me today that showed the windows with dimensions on it, and you could prove to me,
Right.
the existing's this, and this is only, I
So
would be more acceptable,
We'll
but
force it back to the architect to say, if we approve it, they're gonna be 2 inches,
I don't
sorry,
think we
4
should even
inches.
say
4 inches and
dimension.
4
They
inches.
have to be comparable to the windows that they were supposed to save.
within tolerance, I mean, you gotta give them some
Gotta- I mean,
Right, but
Right.
it's not, it's,
idea.
we
'Cause the-
can't really make that,
who knows what the size are?
Do we know the size?
Yeah.
Yes, when the windows were the original building, its standard sizes have changed, as we all know, to what you can get a factory window instead of building a custom window for, was this 25 windows? So that cost would be
Same
exorbitant.
Garage
you know.
door, your
So-
garage door, I mean, you got a standard size for the garage
I'm
door.
comfortable with what Jeff said as close to standard of what the original size was.
yes, without mentioning
'Cause
any
I-
measurements.
Without mentioning measurements, the closest standard size, and as Jeff said, that he's not looking for them to all of a sudden put half the size of window and claim that that's close to standard, so.
Yeah,
Comfortable with that?
I just, that's my thing. Like I said, if it's 5'7" today and you tell me 4'3" is the closest
Different-
window, I
different story.
disagree. There's,
Right.
you
There's
know,
gotta be another standard in there.
Right.
And again, I think I wanna hold them to the 4 inches.
well,
So if we say closest standard not to exceed 4 inches, top and bottom, left and right.
Yeah, because he
Right?
said that.
Yeah, standard
He said
size,
that. Yeah, he said that.
comparable to
Okay, so
the,
we got a motion, a second, and a little discussion on it. Any other discussion or additions or subtractions? Cupola?
I just want to be careful that if we say the 4 inches, because last time we approved this, we said cupola, and we said chimney and things, and they came back and, oh, we can't do that. Is 4 inches reasonable? You know what I mean? I want to be careful that they don't come back, and go, oh, we can't do 4 inches, it's got to be 8 inches, and then we're back into this again.
No,
That's
yeah,
my
it's-
concern.
I mean, it's no more than 4 inches left and right, top
Okay.
and bottom.
so if I may, what I'm hearing on the windows is that we would require a standard size window that's most closely comparable to the size of the windows that were removed.
The original.
That won't exceed the difference of 4 inches. And that's important.
That's important.
That don't exceed 4 inches smaller in width and height. David?
Just really quick, and probably Amanda can answer this question. I just replaced all the windows in the back of my house. I got catalogs all over the dining room table, and standard window sizes, they don't change. They're all over the place. And I put standard window sizes, and I got pretty much what I was, but it's not like 4 inches or 6 inch differences between the sizes.
But there's builder grades that are standard builder grade type windows as opposed to, 31 and 7/8 that might be what you're looking at, which is not a
Pick 'em
custom.
out of a
But
catalog,
it's,
so-
yeah, but it's, again, the builder grade type things
Yeah, probably.
compliant with the housing requirements that they're getting for their financing. There's a lot of oars in the water there on trying to figure that out. Okay, so I want to keep moving along if we can. Any other discussions on that? So we got a motion and a second with the amendment regarding the windows. Did somebody get that, hopefully?
Yep.
Okay, Jeff, sorry.
But I think Earl has to approve of the amendment,
Yes.
and I have to second.
Yes.
So the motion was changed. You approve the motion?
I approve.
You still
The
second
amendment.
is good?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
2 noes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses. Okay, so that motion carries. You guys clear with what needs to happen? Maybe not happy, but clear. Okay, thank you very much. We're gonna move on in our agenda. Where are we, Heather? 8D?
Yes. Morro Mill Pond LLC requests an ADR amendment to their previously approved major site plan to allow revisions to the elevations for the proposed restaurant at 8 to 10 Whitney Road in the industrial district. This
No
did-
revisions allowed.
This did come before Architectural Design Review Committee, and they were
Not built yet.
in favor.
It's just sand.
It's just sand.
One page. There's just one page on our.
Not 90.
Welcome back to the, welcome back to the table. If you could state your name for the record.
Good evening, I'm Laurie Rossio.
David Rossio.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
What do you got here? Tell us about the changes you want to make.
Coffee shop.
So we had approval for the Starbucks back in January, and over the past several months, while we worked on lots of different site-related issues, Starbucks decided to ask us to change the elevations to a newer standard. So what we had been working on and agreed to with Starbucks was no longer their current standard. So we've come back to ADR with what they are requesting us to build now. Footprint, all that stays the same. This is just simply a material change. We have the materials with us if you want. It's actually very similar to the downtown Starbucks, but with a different color palette. And I just thought it helped at ADR. Uh-oh, how do I sign in? How do I sign in?
Your password.
I just thought it would be helpful to show you a picture, because as much as we can show you, elevation drawings.
Can we talk about the traffic pattern? No, I'm kidding.
No,
Only kidding. Come on, I need a little levity. I need a little
okay.
levity.
Yeah, we're up for that.
Well, that wasn't it.
Jeff was gonna jump out of his chair.
No, I was like covering the mic. I'm like, no, I'm not going there tonight.
So,
Fine by us.
and actually, Jeff, if you like, I'll just update you. There's a plan that was circulated with the engineering department to approve both a center line, edge lines, new crosswalks. We have it all laid out
Very
with the
much.
engineering department, and it's part of the plan, and will be incorporated into both sides of Whitney Road's plans.
I do appreciate that. I think it'll make it
You're
a lot safer.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
that was a good one. So
All right.
tell us about this change to Starbucks.
So I just thought this would be the easiest and simplest way to show you what we're proposing, because this is exactly the palette that we're proposing now. And this was built in Danvers, Mass. It's a square version, so it's not exactly the same as the building. This is the color palette. So there's a dark brick, which we have here. There's a wood trim, and then there's a dark ephes feature. And so it's a very dramatically different looking building than what we had prior approval for.
Is this what they're doing to all of them?
No, because this is last year's model.
Oh.
And next year you'll have a different model. We've already been told that if we don't hurry up and build this one, they're gonna change it again. So we're trying to hurry up and build it how,
That's not
This year's.
that's not what's downtown.
it's similar, just it's a different color palette
Okay.
for the most part.
Just
Yep.
clarification, that's not the sign, right? You are proposing
No,
the
this-
circular
yeah.
like in the, okay, I
Right, no,
just,
they,
nope, so you're just looking colors only here.
just trying to show
Awesome.
you what it looks like in real life
Okay.
versus the imagery.
Looks excellent.
drawings.
show
them
the
the
elevation as well.
No, it looks
Oh,
good.
yes, you have the elevations in your
Yeah, we got
packet.
the elevations.
I just thought this would be more clear.
No, I think we're good to go. It is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the board on this? Any member of the audience have any questions or concerns regarding this application?
Why does Starbucks cost so
Nope.
much money?
We'll close the public hearing, and we got a recommendation regarding, again, findings of fact, which is the information that you've provided, the beautiful samples that you brought with us and showed us.
Thank you.
So in 2.2 in your packet is to grant ADR approval to the revised submission, subject to conditions as indicated in the January 20th, 2023 decision letter. Would someone like to make a
So moved.
motion?
Second.
To grant that ADR approval roundly, motion is made, seconded, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, you're all set. So,
Thank you.
pretty quick,
Thank you very much.
pretty
Is that a
quick.
record?
Have a good evening.
I told you here sometimes, but that was pretty
Yes,
quick.
it's a record.
Might I add
All right.
that this is the shortest period of time we've ever seen you on this project?
Yeah,
Well, you'll see us again next month.
Oh, I'm sure.
all right, let's go on to item 7E, if we could read 7E into the record.
Wilcox and Barton Incorporated, on behalf of First Church Holdings LLC, requests major site plan approval for the conversion of a church into 30 residential units and related site improvements, and 2 conditional use permits to allow shared parking spaces and construction of fewer spaces than is otherwise required at 177 North Main Street in the Urban Commercial District. Staff, this was previously determined complete at the last Planning Board meeting. Staff, neither at planning nor engineering, had too many significant issues that we weren't comfortable recommending approval on. We have not received revised plans from the initial submission, so what you have now is essentially what we first got from them, other than some changes based on the CUPs to the location of parking. ADR had quite a few things to say and quite a few recommendations. They did recommend approval, subject to them coming back to ADR, because they'd like to see some of their proposals graphically represented, and also reevaluate some of their proposals. So they did recommend approval, but they wanted him to come back. I believe Mr. Chorlian wants some input on feedback from the board to discuss a few of the issues that we didn't necessarily agree with staff on regarding traffic, sidewalks, and
Telephone poles.
was there a third one? I think
Yeah.
the traffic light, the sidewalks, there may be something I'm missing. I'll let him do it.
Telephone poles and the retaining wall, yeah, I got you. Okay. Welcome to the table. If you guys could state your names for the record.
Good evening, I'm Erin Lambert with Wilcox and Barton.
And I'm John Chorlian, the developer, co-developer with Vet Kelly, who could not join us tonight.
All right, tell us about this project.
Do you want to give them a little overview, or can we dive right in?
It's a,
Yeah, all
Erin
right,
can-
I'll dive in and
Yeah.
he'll fill in some details that I have missed.
Or you could just do it all, Aaron.
I'll try, I'll do my best. So the project involves 4 lots. 2 are the subject of the site plan, and 2 are related by way of a conditional use permit that we're asking for alternative parking, off-site parking. So to orient you, First Church, the former First Church, is located on lots 1 and 2. Ironically, it's 2 lots. They will be merged, so you can consider those 1 lot. So the building is all on 1 lot. It's located in the urban commercial zone. The main road that runs to the south is Washington Street. Comes to the intersection with Main Street. Washington Street notably is one way. And then there is another driveway to the north. So lot 3 is the lot you would see as you were driving down Washington Street. It's the one that has the majority of the parking on it. What also comes with this property is lot 4, which is on Rollins Street. It is an 8-car parking lot. So just wanted to orient everybody. Here's the overall site plan. I'll zoom in a little bit for you. So the program is to preserve the church. There's no major additions going on to the church. It's internal renovations, with the exception of a few notable things that we're doing to the outside in order to bring natural daylighting in, or to bring patios in for some of the residents. So I tried to color code things to make it a little bit easier. The gray you see along the building is where there are some existing windows. They are not fully exposed right now. They're about half. So we're going to pull the ground back to put those full windows back. They're framed out on the inside. So it's not going to be a window well. It's going to be about 8 feet deep, but the goal there is it provides natural light into the units that are in the lower level. They're not for egress. It's not a patio or anything like that. But it will provide a substantial amount of natural light, which will make those units much more pleasant for the residents. On the south side, you'll see in tan, or this sort of peach color, those are outside patios. So right now there are windows, and proposed there, they're going to cut those out and make those doors. So those would be private patios for those residents. The main entrance is this here. And so this is the ADA accessible walkway.
We're not seeing
Oh,
what you're
am I not
pointing
pointing? I apologize, let me switch. So right here, this is the main door. So there's an accessible walkway up to, right now it's concrete. It's going to be a lovely patio. These are all going to have a consistent paver look to them. And there will be a couple of steps on the front. Right now there's a door here, but that's going to be terminated. This will be an exterior deck for that unit. In the back here, this is a depressed lower stair level, and so what you're seeing are, again, pervious pavers. We're using that to mitigate stormwater down at the bottom, and then a series of steps that will come up. In terms of parking, today this lot is just about all pavement. So everything you see here, this is new impervious that we're creating. There are 34 parking spaces, including 2 ADA spaces located on the Washington Street lot. There's 8 parking spaces located on the Rollins Street lot. And there are 7 parking spaces located on the church property to the north. Today, this entire corner is pavement, and there's a slight differentiation in the dark gray, light gray that you see there. We're gonna add a little bit of pavement there to create those additional 3 spaces. Otherwise, this driveway exists, all of this pavement exists, and there is pavement here that we're gonna remove and create green space. All told, the lot coverage does not change significantly. It goes down very slightly, but it doesn't change significantly. One of the other notable differences, and if you looked at the architectural elevations that were submitted to ADR, this is that sort of grand stair that comes down in the front. That is going to be changed to a deck. That's why it kind of looks like a U. We are going to preserve the steps. People can still walk down, and there'll be a lower patio as well. But that's going to be changed to be another sort of community outdoor gathering space. And John can talk a little bit more about those spaces. This right here is an interesting feature. So it is an access easement to the benefit of the Islamic Society, which is our neighbor to the north. So we're not able to encumber that with parking, but we are going to use that pavement. It's there. It's an access easement for this rear door, or this second door for them. It's going to be the secondary door into our building. It's going to be where people could use it as a loading area if they're moving in or out. So it would be lightly used. We don't anticipate it being used heavily, but it is there and serves dual purposes. And then in the back, they're proposing to build some covered, how would you describe them for the garbage? Basically just some, we don't have room for a full-size dumpster, but garbage removal is the responsibility of the developer. We anticipate having sort of the wheeled ones that I'm familiar with in other towns that have dump trucks that come and pick them up. And so they will coordinate that with a private hauler. So there'll be a series of those on each of those doors, but they are covered. Is that accurate?
That's
Perfect. The property is serviced by municipal water and sewer, natural gas. We're not making any extensive changes to those, other than we will be, updating all the internal sprinklers and whatnot. The project, prior to being submitted for site plan approval or site plan application, was granted a number of variances from the zoning board. I'm happy to go through them if you're interested, but many of them relate to, for example, we have 30 dwelling units where 8 are permitted. It's obviously a very large building, 30. In addition to the 30, there's going to be multiple community spaces inside the building. With that came a request for a relief in parking. So 60 would normally be required. We're required to have 49. And then given the nature of the downtown site, we got a little bit of relief for things like the size of the outdoor patios, 100 square feet where 300 would be required, or they're 5 feet from the property line where 15 feet is required. The parking spaces are slightly smaller, but we feel that they will still be adequate. So instead of being 9 feet wide, they're going to be 8.5. Instead of being 19 feet long, they'll be 17. So we're calling them hybrid. They're not nearly as small as a compact space. We are keeping the full aisle width though, so there's still a 24-foot aisle. As part of our application, we are asking you to consider 2 conditional use permits. Both relate to parking. So the first, which I touched on earlier, the church takes up the majority of the site. There are 7 parking spaces on our site, so we're looking to have the other parking spaces tied to the property through a conditional use permit for alternative parking off-site. They are less than 500 feet as required by the ordinance. There are 34 spaces on Washington Street, including our ADA spaces, and there are 8 on Rollins Street. They go with the church now. They've been, the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness owns the 4 parcels, and they're being sold together. The other request we have is to defer the parking spaces, and John can talk a little bit more about the composition of the units. But given our proximity to downtown, and knowing that we have a number of 1-bedroom units, we are requesting a conditional use permit to defer construction of the 7 to the north. So if you look on this graphic here, shows you where the 2 off-site parking lots are located. If we're able to defer those parking spaces, because we really don't feel that they're necessary, we gain about 2,000 square feet of pervious area back, which we would really prefer to see. So we submitted this. I know that staff did not have a chance to look at it yet, but this will be incorporated in our full package. So it basically will show that, you know, we don't need a retaining wall there anymore. The green space that was located in this corner will be larger. So we're really hoping that that's something that you would support, and are happy to answer any questions on that. There is a landscape rendering. It is a little bit outdated. This was the original version of the site plan that had tandem parking spaces. And it had, right now, there is an access easement through the property to this house that's in the back. So please ignore this. We were proposing to give them access off of the project. That was an earlier iteration. So this is now entirely a row of parking, and this back row that was tandem is now green space. And there is still impervious that will be located here. So those are the only changes that are different from what we're showing. And as you can see, you know, these parking spaces, originally we only had 4. We need 7 in order to meet our requirement to meet zoning. And those are the 7 spaces that we are requesting to defer and keep them as green space until such time as they're needed or not needed. As Heather mentioned, there are a number of comments in the staff reports that we didn't have a chance to address. The engineering, many of those we're comfortable with addressing, so we appreciate the willingness to provide a conditional approval. There are 3 comments, however, that we wanted to discuss with the board because we're hoping for your consideration. The first is the Washington Street sidewalk. So if you look at the photograph, you'll see the condition as it exists today. So the sidewalk is 5 feet wide. However, there are 2 or 3 utility poles which are installed in the sidewalk. And they're not even right up against the back of the curb, they're really into it. So we've been told by staff that the city is unable to plow this with their standard equipment because it's not 5 feet wide. And they would like us to basically pull this curb back and make it 5 feet wide beyond the you know, from the poles. While we like the idea of having the city maintain them, we've taken a look at the economics. It's 270 feet of curb along our Washington Street frontage that would have to be moved. And in addition, we would lose all of that green space on a site that's already rather tight. The other thing that we've noted is north of our property, or excuse me, west of our property, the condition exists. So it's not like if we correct this portion of the block that the city plow is going to be able to plow this whole block. There are still portions of the block that will be obstructed with the limited width. And lastly, as the developers, Ben and John, recognize that this sidewalk is critically important to being cleared early and often for their residents to be able to walk from the 2 parking lots. So they already anticipate that they will be maintaining this in order to provide adequate access to their building. So they request that the board not make it a condition of the site plan approval that they widen the sidewalk.
The only other point I'd add there is that this is really the narrowest yard that we have between any frontage and the building. So this is where we're particularly reluctant to give up existing green space.
Quick question on the sidewalk.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Aaron, I didn't catch it. I was writing while you were speaking. The applicant will be plowing the sidewalks?
Yeah, I mean, as a practical matter,
right,
these sidewalks will be heavily used by occupants of the building. And I mean, any of us who live in Concord know that the city cannot plow every sidewalk in front of every house, you know, in the morning. And I mean, we're simply we're gonna treat it as though it were a walkway of the property.
Okay.
So, you know, I don't care if it's 4 feet wide, 5 feet wide, we're gonna plow it, you know.
Do you know if this is, this particular stretch along Washington Street is a school sidewalk? School pedestrian?
I don't know the answer.
I don't know,
Okay.
but I would doubt it as the Walker School is not there anymore, but I don't know.
And this plan, I think, shows the other point that I was making, was that this stretch from our driveway to the west, and I'll try not to Peter. This section also has some utility poles that obstruct the sidewalk. So they're not going to be able to just plow the entire block. It would just be a push.
It is slightly maddening that the sidewalk is 6 feet wide, and if the utility poles had been set actually on the inside face of the curbing, you'd have 5 feet, but they weren't. One is more than a foot inbound of that.
There's one in particular that's,
Yeah,
that's
it's, you know,
that's
it's,
way in.
I mean,
It's like right
they're
in the
6
middle
feet
of
of
the
width.
sidewalk.
If the poles, you know,
And it's
10
kind of in
inches,
this area
it
here
could have been set
for
in a
now.
way that we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Unless the poles were set before the sidewalks were built.
They're all new poles on
Really?
Washington Street, so, I mean, they've all been set in the last few years. But as Aaron pointed out, we're not just talking about the 2 poles that, on our frontage. There are 2 more further to the west of Washington Street, so even addressing this here isn't going to allow plow to continue, a city plow to continue.
All right, continue.
Sure. So the second item we respectfully request that you consider is at the intersection of Washington Street and North Main Street. And we've shown you a picture. So this sidewalk at this location is not accessible, and I believe it's also as it relates to, there's a signal here that you have to, pedestrians would press the button. So in talking to the traffic engineer, this area, this sidewalk, is planned to be reconstructed sometime in the future in order to make it accessible. So they've asked us to build a retaining wall to accommodate that future change. A couple of challenges with that. If we put a retaining wall there to lower it, we'll effectively be needing to reconstruct the sidewalk now, and there's no design that's been done, and it would involve a lot more work at the intersection. So not only is it difficult to accomplish without taking it so far and with no design for the city sidewalk that we've been made aware of, it would also be a significant cost to the project. So I'll let John speak more.
Yeah, this is probably the most minor of the 3 items that we're asking you not to include as conditions, but yeah, I mean, essentially, it's an existing condition. The city is planning to do a fair amount of work on that segment of North Main Street over the next several years, including addressing some of the sidewalk issues, and hopefully this is resolved, but it hasn't been designed. I mean, I fail to see why, as an owner of a property that just happens to be there, why we have to come in and create some additional retaining wall for some future improvement, not even knowing what the scope of that improvement is, and where there's nothing about that's happening with this project that's, placing any additional pressure on this condition. I mean, it seems to me it's not a huge construction item, but the sidewalk's going to get torn up by the city in a few years. That'd be a great time to put in whatever additional retaining is needed for that corner. We don't. It's not a project. You'll hear this thing. I mean, we were granted a 79E tax relief from the city council. As Matt Walsh's report to the council spelled out, these are strange, construction times. I mean, this is a project that, as Matt's report points out, it's marginal financially, and we don't have any of these costs in our budget. And it's not a project that can accept a lot more additional costs that we weren't planning on.
But in addition to the costs, when John asked me, what would this take? As the engineer, I struggle with what I would do and how I would tie it in and how we would make it happen. So I just wanted to put that on the table in addition to the cost that is definitely a concern for the developers. And the third one is the driveway to the north, and this is a really unique circumstance. So there's a driveway here. This is the very north of our property. I will show you where it is. So it's this driveway here. And so when you're on North Main Street, you come to a stop here, there's a signal. This is the Ferry, is it Ferry Street?
Ferry Street
Ferry
to the
Street.
left, yeah.
Yeah. And so it is unique for there to be sort of 3 traffic movements, if you will. 1, 2, and 3, in this way, or 4, without having one of them be signalized. However, it's really a driveway. So there's a property to the north that has no access other than using this driveway. And interestingly, they have no rights to do so, but it is their only access. It's the parking for the units. And this provides secondary access for the Islamic Society. With the deferral of our 7 parking spaces, so I guess I should say there are 7 parking spaces there today. We've worked with code, we've determined that that's what's there today. So even if we were to build the 7, it's not a condition that's changing. However, we are requesting to defer those spaces, so we really feel that there will be less traffic there than is there today. And I'll let John speak a little bit more, but certainly the cost of trying to signalize this driveway, which has very low use, is not something that the project ever envisioned, nor can it sustain.
That's quite fair to say. I mean, this is signalizing that is I don't know if it's 40,000 or 100,000, but it's a big number. And to Aaron's point, that driveway serves 3 uses right now, and it's, access to an apartment building for which there's no easement, but, as a practical matter, we're not gonna barricade that. Access to the Islamic Center and access to 7 parking spaces on existing parking spaces on our property. If you don't grant us the CUP to defer those 7 spaces, we will have exactly, the usage in the future will be exactly the same as it has been for the last 60 years. If you grant us the CUP, the usage on that driveway will have reduced. And our usage of our own driveway, I mean, I can't remove the driveway because it's burdened by a right-of-way for the benefit of the Islamic Center, but literally, we will not be using it for this site at all, so.
So who uses it now?
Well, it's used by the Islamic Center. When it was originally constructed, it was the sole access to the former Capital Offset printing company.
Yeah, printing company.
So that's what they used. The Islamic Center has, also acquired property on Pearl Street, and they now have an entrance on Pearl Street. So they use this sometimes. They use Pearl Street sometimes. So and then lastly, there's this little existing 7-space parking lot just where the wording on that is, and it's on the church property. It was used by the church and was also used by Capital Offset under a lease arrangement.
And the building located just to the north, I believe it's a 3-family, or it has 3 apartments in it. There's about 6
right.
parking spaces. They're literally right here, and that is their only access to the parking. And we've been out there, John and I have spent quite a bit of time on the property, chasing down utilities and envisioning what some of these grades were gonna look like, and at many different times a day, and it's very quiet. There's just, there's very little traffic coming out of that apartment, but it's needed. We need to keep it.
And there is a sign that could use a little spiffing up that, says right turn only as you exit.
A little spiffing up. That's generous.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're amenable to signs.
Okay.
So-
Continue.
With that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'll bet you got some.
I would just add one quick thing. On the CUP, I mean, the 7-space, deferring 7 spaces, I mean, I've found the planning board sort of generally friendly to the idea of let's not create extra impervious if you're reasonably comfortable that they won't be needed. And you have this tool in the CUP that the zoning board doesn't have to, should we be wrong, they can be created later. We have 30 apartments, 14 2-bedrooms, 16 1-bedrooms. Under the proposed zoning ordinance, only 1 1/4 spaces would be required per unit. That would be 38 spaces. We have 49. I'm requesting with the CUP that we actually build 42, so that would be 4 more than the new ordinance would require. These have been designed to be, they can be easily constructed later. I mean, as a practical matter, a developer at a market rate project you're not even gonna need to ask me to build those later if we need them. I mean, that is part of the business model of this project, is that we can provide adequate parking for tenants. I just don't think we need 49 spaces, 42 is sufficient. Part of the reason I say that is that we use a permitted system for parking, it's not assigned spaces, so I have 42 spaces, but I can issue more than 42 permits. You can always oversubscribe a lot to some extent, so on a permanent basis, the lot behaves larger than a 42 space assigned lot does, if that makes any sense.
So there's no option to get rid of that other driveway completely from your perspective?
I'd love to, it's burdened by a right-of-way benefiting the Islamic Center. It'd be
better for you if it wasn't there at all.
right. It provides no benefit, although I would take that back. I think it will, for fire access purposes.
Oh, yes, sure.
That it will be important. I'm not positive that is necessary to meet the NFPA, 101 fire access requirements, but I would be shocked if Paul Royce wouldn't,
But all
want
your
that to be
parking
there.
spots are gonna be on the other side of the building, and access is gonna be through that front Washington Street side.
Yeah, I mean, really, the primary access is through the parking lot, the west entrance.
Through the parking lot on the west entrance, so not on Washington Street. I thought I heard Aaron say the main entrance was on Washington.
The main pedestrian, the main entrance pedestrian entrance will sort of read as the building.
That's kind of that entrance that's there now, right? That's kind of got the arch over it and whatnot, okay, all right.
I think that's where guests will enter. I
But
think
most of the
that's
people
where-
coming off the parking lot, that was gonna be my question,
Right
is
here.
you're gonna be funneling people down that narrow sidewalk, okay.
No,
I got you now.
I mean, people will walk through the corridor and enter the.
So let's hit the sidewalk, because I am struggling with the sidewalk and the telephone poles and I get it, it doesn't sometimes make good sense from the dollars and cents perspective, but if there's a problem with it, we're here to say, hey, we need to fix this and make it either accessible or, in this case, available to the city to plow. I mean, I get you want to do it, or you'll do it, but I'm struggling with not fixing a problem right out of the gate. What's the hang up is 270 feet, I get it. So what are we talking, 2 or 3 poles during there? Is there any bump out? Is there any options I'm just looking for ideas on how to, how to bump into that little retaining
I guess
wall.
what I'd say, Rich, you're still gonna have 2 poles further up Washington Street.
Right.
I mean, the city is not going to bring a sidewalk plow where I've moved, my curb a foot to
Yeah.
give them the 5 feet, and you're gonna run back into 4 feet or less, just west of us.
So do
I'm-
they do it, they don't do it now at all?
No, I mean, it's pole,
Okay.
yeah. And, I mean, I snow blow we will
Okay.
treat it as our own, really, because
Best of.
I mean, for my point earlier,
Yeah.
we will sign multi-million-dollar personal guarantees. I mean, it's pretty important to us that
Sure.
the tenants, like this experience, and I think the ability to move around the building
Okay.
safely
Nope, I
is
got
one
you.
of the things they will care about.
I got you. And the fact that the main
reasonable.
entrance is gonna be in the back helps me with that as well, so. Let's, let's roll around ahead, Earl, first, so.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Earl, go ahead.
Thank you. Have you checked with Unitil, or are the poles in the right place?
Are they, what do you mean by?
Are the poles in the correct place? Have you checked with Unitil?
So could you have Unitil move those poles to
They
the
have-
curb?
I mean,
I'm happy to, we have to deal with Unitil and other things.
yeah.
Would
I
they
mean,
move
that's-
the pole?
I've run into issues in the past where poles are in the way, and I've called Gary Miller and say, hey, Gary, before I chase anything, is this pole in the right place? And more often than not, it's yes, but sometimes it's no.
Yep.
And they move it.
Their dime.
The ratepayers do.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. Tomato, tomato. Amanda?
I'm happy to ask.
So, for ADA reasons, and I assume that there would be, ADA access from the parking lot on the west end where you're saying is the main entrance. Now, let's just say there is someone that is requiring to be in a wheelchair yet they're not always gonna come straight from their car, so let's just say they go towards, the main street or the downtown area, and they use, are they gonna have access, cause they live in that building, to come up and around? Are they gonna have to be on the street to get in access to, an entrance into the building? Meaning, are they gonna be able to get around that less than 5 foot?
It's wide
So I don't
enough for
know the width,
ADA.
I don't know the
It's-
width of,
yeah.
of a wheelchair on a standard, that is, so I'm just making sure that now that there's residents there,
Sure.
that they'd have access if they decided to travel, by wheelchair and by foot down to the downtown area, that they'd be able to get back, and they wouldn't have to be on the road
Yep.
to access back.
It is an accessible path. It's
Okay.
wide enough for ADA access. It's not wide enough for the 5-foot wide city plow.
Okay, just making sure, thank you.
No, great question.
If the city had a smaller plow, no big deal.
I just need a clarification, because during your presentation, I misunderstood. Did you say the ADA access is off Washington Street? Or is it the back of the building?
The ADA access is off Washington Street.
So you're taking people from the parking lot, and they don't have direct access to your building. They have to go out on the city street, down the city street, and into the building.
Down the sidewalk.
The sidewalk.
Along the city street, on the sidewalk, but not on your property. So you can't make that back door accessible at all. So the reason I'm getting it is your parking spaces, if that's the case, normally the idea is your parking space would be closest to, so meaning they shouldn't be,
They are the closest space to the accessible route.
then wouldn't they have to be the 3 spaces closest to Washington Street?
They are. They're right here. They're these ones right here.
On this plan, they're the 2 opposite. That's why
Oh,
I'm looking at the site
Oh,
plan.
I see what you're saying. They're here.
They're up there. So they're not really the ones closest to.
They can be here.
So I'm struggling with the sidewalk issue as well. I guess a couple ways. If the cost of doing 270 feet is too much, I hear what you're saying about up the street, it's an issue, but we're dealing with your property. That's another project or another issue. Maybe there's a middle ground where can you provide the easement if the city needed to widen that sidewalk in future? And maybe we can just provide a bump out wide enough for the plows around those poles rather than the full frontage. Something along that line. So there's a little bit of a, if the plow can, I don't know, if it needs to be 10 feet long by 1 foot wide and kind of curl in a little bit. Yes, it's a little less green space, I get it. But then if the easement can be provided such that if the city does redo the sidewalks in this area, that they could then take that on and not have to come back to you at a future date and negotiate that out or whatever. That's just, you don't have to answer me now, but just something to think about. I am a little concerned, you have an ADA, you have that little white space between the driveway entrance and the loading zone.
Right here?
Nope, on the street, that one. You have, so that has to be a ramp up, flat, and ramp back down. I don't know how that's gonna work, because this, one of the comments from engineering is to provide curb radius, which is gonna make that even narrower. Something to look at, and I'm not comfortable with so many spaces being less than 19 feet. A pickup truck is 18 feet long. Extended cab with if they got a tow hitch on it, and you've got 4 spaces that are 19 feet, and everything else on the site is less, if you don't build those 7. Those 7 would be the only other ones that would actually meet code.
These 8.
On-site, I'm saying, but,
These aren't on-site. They're off-site like the 8.
right. I'm struggling with that size of those spaces, because I've seen in other developments in the city when we've allowed something less, and a pickup truck's there, and you physically can see the pickup truck sticking out beyond the parking space into the drive aisle. And there's a lot of these in this site. Am I to understand that buffer permit that they got the zoning for, is that different than the requirement that parking has to be set back 5 feet from a property line, so they don't overlap it? Okay. Just wanted to,
Yeah, the perimeter buffer requirement is a completely different thing.
well, that's what I'm saying then. So this doesn't meet the 5-foot setback for parking then from the property line?
Did you guys get a variance?
There are
for that?
many, I hate the term, but there are many grandfathered conditions
When we talked to
that the
Tracy,
zoning
that was one.
administrator has determined. I mean, this is basically, if you go out there right now, it's 100% impervious. So everything you see that's green is new. So to the extent that there isn't a 5-foot setback, it's a condition that already exists, that is pre-existing and permitted. So says Tracy Hutton.
So when you say permanent, we have a site plan for when this was put in to show that they were allowed less than 5 feet or whatever.
It was probably pre-zoning. Like,
What's it, sorry, what's
the zoning was probably not in, the regulations were probably not in place at that time. I mean, this is older than,
Right. So on your plans, I know the site plan on 1.3 shows this parking layout, but then your grading and drainage plan shows the other stacked parking. So there's inconsistencies. C 1.4 shows that stacked parking into that green space. So there's some inconsistencies between the different plans and what your parking layout is.
Correct, the original plan set had the tandem
Yes.
parking arrangement.
Right.
in
But they're mixing and matching the set we have is what
Right,
I'm
so
saying.
the only thing that we resubmitted was the updated site plan, yes.
Okay. All right, I'll let other people talk and.
Okay. Suzanne?
I did notice that staff had asked for more shade trees in the parking lot. And that hadn't been addressed. And I think that's on the side, the west side?
West side.
Yeah. And then, I don't know if there was any mention, but what I found kind of unusual is that you have all the trees planted on, like, all together, like, and not mixed up, so, which can kind of be hazardous. And I've noticed it with the ash. If you had, like, all those crab apples that are all in a row, and then you've got the maples all in a row, and then the Japanese lilac all in a row, that if something were to happen, you'd lose the whole bunch of them, whereas if you kind of intermix them. So, I mean, that was kind of like a not very creative and thoughtful way of placing them. So you might want to consider mixing them up a little in case that were to happen.
Okay.
And then I think there could be some more shade trees in the parking lot because of the asphalt. And there wouldn't need to be many, but.
Yeah, I
we
agree,
talked
that
about-
green
yeah.
space on the west side, we will add one or two around, sort of with two
I think, yeah, I can't, there's.
two concepts. One is, I have to have snow storage somewhere, so, that, and secondly, that driveway accesses a house to the rear, 20 and a half Washington Street, and my discussions with that neighbor have been, we want to design that green space so it kind of reads as her, even though it's our property, it reads sort of as her yard. So
Yeah,
it's
but a
one-
tree wouldn't bother, I mean, a shrub would bother.
I
mean, a
agree.
tree would-
It's,
yeah.
I think adding one or two trees
Yeah,
there
I think you two would be.
makes fun.
Yeah, so,
And then in terms of species, I mean,
Long run, it just makes sense, you can use, it's not about the species, it's that they're all together. And in case there was something like.
and I guess I'd say, my landscape architect and I, we like that to an extent. That crabapple row, that choice, that species choice was one, so it doesn't get too big because it's not a very large area and that's the handsomest portion of the building. I have 15-year-old maple trees in front of my house that I planted myself by hand, and, they're big. These will become big if I want a species that doesn't overshadow the building and doesn't, overwhelm that space.
So
I'd be
you're-
happy to add more shade trees, and then, personally, I like the tree lilacs. We use them at Sacred
Yeah,
Heart
no,
a
I'm
lot.
not
I just
saying-
think it's
I'm
and I
not
like.
saying you don't use them, I'm just saying that you might want to consider using them, but mixing them up, because if something were to happen, then you lose everything. And yet what you're talking about is something very aesthetic, but maybe not horticulturally relevant, because that's one of the things that they've really been thinking about what people should be doing. Because if you're gonna lose one,
Yep.
it's not as bad in that one site but losing all of them. And you can still have your crabs, but maybe you don't have, I don't know, 9 of them? a lot, I mean, you could always have something else at each end and have the crafts. You don't have to do it, it's just a suggestion, but it's.
I will,
some-
I will truly discuss, think about that, discuss that. I mean,
What are you gonna do with on that south elevation, what are you gonna do with the plants that are there now? Are they gonna stay?
gone.
Yeah. Okay.
To your right, Rich.
You're right, your
What?
staff.
To your right.
Yep,
And I just wanted to say, there's other species that are very similar to crabapple in size and habit and appearance that you could just replace, every other one with another species that is gonna get the same height, and people probably wouldn't even be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to suggestions.
And for the other trees as well,
I think in some cases, like sort of a run of the same species can be attractive. I think it would be there, but I'm
So let's,
open to suggestions.
let's talk about the front elevation, or the Main Street elevation. The architectural, the ADR packet I saw or something had kind of these boxes up on the front of the left and the right of the stairs. So tell us what's gonna
kind of
happen.
zoom in on that a little bit.
Tell us what's gonna happen there. Is it,
Well, that really is what ADR wanted us to bring back to them.
okay.
We will essentially overbuild, we will build these decks over the
Stairways?
existing granite stair,
Yeah.
leaving the central, a 5-foot section of the granite stairs exposed. That will continue to be a route into the building. These patios will be, these elevated decks, and there'll be patios immediately below them. I mean, those will be some of the most important outdoor public spaces for the project. I think we all agreed at ADR that this presentation doesn't really give them enough.
Yeah.
We need to do better, and it needs to be more detailed, so I said, fine.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and the doors, like the whole package, everything, that is super important.
I saw some comments about the 54, whatever, Pleasant Street, the Sacred Heart, the space above the arch that's there, the material that's there. Are you proposing the same material be used for the arches over here as well? I thought I read somewhere they didn't like the material that was there. I just didn't know why they didn't like it.
I mean, we had a very discussion about what happens. I mean, there is sort of a wood panel above there now.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a lot of discussion about what we had proposed to ADR were that the doors are going to be sort of a storefront door. I mean, I think ADR is fine with that.
Yeah.
I had proposed sort of an aluminum powder-coated panel to match that in color, similar to what I had done at Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
There was some discussion about whether that was the best approach. So, I mean, essentially what I think we're gonna have a robust discussion going back to ADR and looking at a bunch of concepts, and I'm happy to go with what,
So the wood doors that are there now are gone?
gone.
Yeah, okay.
In part because the space immediately inside of those doors is a public lounge, so the ability to dump some light in is important to that space as well. And this will 98% look like the church it's been for a long, long time, but there will be some of these elements that I think help the project to read that it's turned the page a little bit.
And there's no desanctification or whatever they call it, hasn't been a church for a while, so there's nothing that you need to do
I don't
like.
think the United Church of Christ does that.
Okay, so I was gonna say, for the
think
Pleasant
just the
Street one, I
diocese.
remember there was a whole
No
series.
purple ribbon, no.
Okay, a whole series that we had to deal with on that. So you're gonna be you're kind of taking another shot at the front boxes there and giving us some better architecturals to look at?
And then, yes, and if you want to scan down half a sec. And then the other, this was by far the biggest, just down a couple of sheets maybe. Yep, sorry, and then the other, that quintuple window right there, which used to be a chapel, ADR said we could do a lot better in terms of the window presentation there, and we agreed. So that's the other item that we said we'll.
Where's that? Oh, right down underneath that arch space, okay.
Yeah, we'll
So
do
that's
some-
south
we'll do a
elevation.
lot better than that.
So that's south elevation on the back building, right?
We call it the annex. It's really, it actually is the oldest part of the building. That's an 1870 segment of the building. The
Okay,
church
so-
burned down.
So is that where above those arches, or the brown that's there now, is that gonna be a flat material or metal material? It looked almost metal on our stuff.
I would say on that one, I don't even know what it's gonna be now.
Okay, all right.
There are
I know
floor
getting down the
ceiling
weeds, I just-
assemblies that bisect the
Yeah.
window, so we have to do something. Maybe it's a spandrel glass approach. I think we all agreed that's, we can do a heck of a lot better than that.
Okay. Jeff?
Not on architectural, but I kind of need to go back to the ADA
Okay.
comment. Aaron, you're aware that federal government gave the final ruling on ProAg in August, and the new requirement is 48 inches clear. It's no longer 36. So around those poles, if you've only got 36, you're gonna have 48 if you're calling that your accessible route to your building.
It's 50 inches on the one pole that you will
Okay.
pass.
I'm just trying to scale off your
No,
plan.
I mean,
Not a 5 foot, but I-
The other
I'm-
issue,
It's, actually, I take that back. It's 410, the one pole that you will pass from the parking lot. It's 410 from the pole to the curb. It's 42 on the other one, but you won't pass the other pole, so you've got.
right, but if somebody wants to go downtown, they do.
Okay, but you've got 4-2.
I'm just saying, it scaling out a lot less than that on the plan. The other issue is if you go back to your site plan, you have a telephone pole that is west of your driveway, and it's actually located within the ADA ramp, which is not allowed by ADA.
Sorry.
So the actual main driveway in on the left there, you've got a pole that's actually located within that ramp.
Even with the 48-inch clear?
I believe they don't allow it at all within the sloped area of the physical ramp.
Okay. I will verify that.
So that might be one where you figure you may have to go into your site a little bit to get that ramp, so that the pole is not in the physical ramp.
Is there a retaining wall on that end?
Just
Think
curbing.
there-
Just curb.
Okay. Okay. I noticed in the packet, the very last page, 15 of 15, we've got granite cap piers, ornamental fencing, precast retaining walls. It looks like either maybe Sacred Heart, or where are you proposing the fences? The metal fence?
The metal fence?
Yeah.
Essentially entire,
There's one here.
South elevation, all along that south elevation?
all along the south elevation start,
Up
where
on-
where there's green space.
So above your little retaining wall, not retaining wall, but the little sidewalk,
Yep,
it's gonna be behind that.
Yep, it's here,
yep.
and then it runs.
Punctuated with these piers with granite caps, and then, ornamental powder coated aluminum, wrought iron.
So it runs the entire frontage up
Fencing.
until it.
So
turns.
I saw, I was walking through a historical area. If you can scroll up a little bit, Aaron, on that picture, just to the, so the corner of Washington and North Main, right down there where that sidewalk, kind of awful looking sidewalk is. They had an ornamental fence that went down, and at about 4 feet, it cut into the property and then cut back out, so it left a little 4 foot by 4 foot space that they'd put a tree in and put a little bit of, kind of softening the corner. I'm just concerned about the corner, people walking by, grabbing the fence, swinging around the corner. So they took out the corner and kind of cut it in with a little area, put some mulch in, put a tree in.
You're saying it
and
came
looked-
in like this?
So it came in like that. Only 4 feet, but,
There'll be a pier there, a 2 foot by 2 foot pier.
oh, on the corner.
Yeah, and then so the fence is then set a full
Okay,
foot
so
into
that's
the
fine.
pier.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't want it to be cornered right on the thing. Okay, sorry. Okay, so keep going back to architectural. What else from the board? Any other comments, questions? We'll open it up to the audience. Any member of the audience have any questions or concerns about this application? Yes, come on up, sir. We'll send you guys back. Take notes.
Good evening, my name is Nick Holmes. I live at 131 North State Street, Rollins Court, another one of Mr. Charlian's projects, and I'm here with other residents of Rollins Court. We are in favor of this project. We think that the design is visionary. I love the increased green space. We love the architectural touches. We think it's a great use of this area, a great way to preserve this historic building. We're strongly in favor of John and Ben's project.
Great, good to hear. How is Rollins Court treating you?
Fabulous.
See, you have us to thank, really. I mean, John brought a good plan forward, but we kind of tweaked it a little bit, and we made it, made it really what it is today.
Yeah.
A village.
No,
And it truly is a village?
It's truly a pocket neighborhood.
I don't wanna-
We gather every Thursday at 5 o'clock
great.
on the patio.
Oh, I love to hear
for a
that.
little community gathering.
Oh, that's great. And that's what he sold us, and it's good to hear that, it's good to hear that that's what it really is.
It's working.
How much is he paying you? Come on. No? Okay.
No, but truly.
That's great. I'm glad to hear.
It's become a neighborhood, a pocket community that's really
Kudos to all of you guys for keeping it up and really making it look great, because every time I drive by there, the flowers are blooming, the lawn's mowed, it looks beautiful. Looks like you just moved in. So.
We all have our different strengths, and we all contribute. It's like a family, where somebody is a flower gardener, and they do that.
Yep.
Somebody else loves the roses, they focus on that, they lead our effort on that.
Excellent.
One of the gentlemen that's here tonight just repaired the brick walkway. Because it was falling into disrepair in a couple of places. So it's truly a family neighborhood, and it's been
Thursday
great.
night, you said?
Thursday night. If you
Okay.
want to come,
Make it
come on. Thursday night, 5
Really
o'clock. See you
cool.
tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for your testimony.
Mr.
Questions?
Do you mind signing in?
If you could just sign in, just let
Yep,
us know.
got it.
You don't want to
I'm
by
guessing
Rich.
Mr. Holmes gets his sidewalk shoveled first.
I bet he does. You get your sidewalk shoveled? Well, you don't really
We're
have.
we're different because
Yeah.
we own our property. We're a
Yeah.
condo association that
Yeah.
owns our property, so we have a contractor that comes in.
Perfect.
and
Oh,
does it.
okay.
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, yes, sir.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Because you just mentioned, not of you, I apologize. You just mentioned sidewalk, and you got me thinking. Is there any place else in the city where a private entity maintains the sidewalk for the city? And is that something that has to get some sort of
Yeah, that was-
relief
that
from
was
the
a question.
council?
Yeah.
Mark Zabrowski does.
Yeah, Mark Zaborowski actually
But is
does.
there something that, some council action that also has to occur?
Well, it's
to
interesting that it
allow
doesn't get plowed now, which
Well, I'm sure
I don't know why it doesn't get plowed
Does it
now.
not get plowed at all, or just not with a snow plow?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's-
It does not get plowed now. Either side, there's only sidewalks on your side of the street, right? There's not a sidewalk on the other side of the street.
Yes, there is, they're on the
Oh, there
other
is?
side as well. I
But
just
it
want to
is
make sure that
substandard.
if we end up agreeing this is something that can happen, are we talking just snow plowing? Or because this is an access now, ADA into the building, are they required for
Yeah.
some sort of paving maintenance, everything? Because it's an ADA access route and that's their primary? I just want to understand this, and if it's a council somehow has to agree to it, and, liability, type of actions.
If I could answer.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I have never heard of a complaint coming to city council that someone was shoveling a city sidewalk.
But that's because they choose to, not because he's agreeing to it as part of his approval.
Yeah.
Right,
Well,
but
I
so,
guess what I don't mean to say I'm not agree, I'm just saying I'm going to do it. I don't think you need an
But
easement,
assuming in the best faith that you do it, an ice storm comes, somebody slips and falls and hurts themselves, do they go after you, or do they go after the city? Because it's city property.
That's their accessible route, and they're
Right.
saying that because they can't contain it on
That's a
their
good
site.
question. Yeah, it's a good
So
question.
that's where I'm having a struggle right
Okay.
now. Heather has her hand.
Yes.
So, the ADA piece is not something that we enforce from a regulatory perspective. I mean, we have our regulations, but what you're citing are federal laws or state laws, not necessarily.
Federal.
Yes, so federal laws, which are different from what we regulate in our site plan and subdivision regulations. Do we have a responsibility to enforce the federal laws in this planning board? Because that question has come up before, and the answer has not been yes. It's been, those are federal laws, and we do what we have to do with their city regulations. We have in the past had staff that was really vigilant about enforcing them. But also, in my understanding, the last thing the city council would want to do is make it harder for people to shovel or plow any city sidewalk.
I mean, the city does have a plan where they start in the center
Understood.
and it's school routes, and it's sort of like throwing a pebble in the river. My sidewalks get plowed 3 days after the storm. Yeah.
We should get a sidewalk.
We probably wish more people would shovel and
No,
plow
I-
the
as I
city
said, I'm not
sidewalks.
saying- I just
to
am
your point,
trying
it's a
to
great- no,
understand the
it's a good
question.
point. It's a good
And
point.
Heather, I would say that a federal law drops down to state law, drops down to city. We can't just ignore and say we don't enforce ADA, because it's not an ordinance.
No, I don't think
It's a
that.
federal law, so we
But in,
should.
with regard to the city requiring an easement on the city
I didn't-
sidewalk to meet, I don't think that that's.
I didn't say we had, I just was asking if there was a council, if the council had to approve it. I didn't say we had to do it, I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
I
because
will
I've
ask the question.
I've just seen a lot of times, use of the sidewalk by a private entity requires, Mr. Dupree was in here earlier, and for him to be able to use the sidewalk to put this in requires a council action. I was just asking the question.
That's a good question.
Yep, it's good. I'll ask the question.
Okay, any other comments, questions? No follow-up? You didn't have any rebuttals against the Rollins Court folks? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much.
Good thing our meetings are on Wednesday night.
Yeah, yes, I know it.
Pretend I'm not here.
So I am a little concerned, Heather, if you can kind of update us here on the all repeat comments, repeat comment. Is that staff recommends the board discuss, is that regarding the insufficient time to review? I'm just a little unsure on all repeat comments. What does that mean on there?
They didn't submit revised plans, so all the comments are the same.
Okay. So your point under 3.2, which says the staff is in support of the CUP, however, there's insufficient time to review updated plans reflecting this proposal, which was submitted on the 13th.
So we may have updated comments that pertain to those plans. In principle, we're not opposed to the CUP to not construct parking that's not required, but there may be additional comments that come out of that.
Okay.
So I think as long as the comment remains that they address staff comments, there may be additional staff comments once we review that, if we discover new issues.
Okay. Okay. And engineering comments, as far as engineering goes, I know there's some different pieces and parts here, a lot of moving parts in the project. Are we comfortable with where we're sitting now?
I think the one issue that the board hasn't discussed is, in one issue that is of significant concern to staff, is the signalization of that intersection. Typically, when you have a major site plan and there's an existing condition that's failing, which this intersection is, we ask the applicant to address and correct that issue. It's true they're not putting more traffic on it, it's a failing condition as it is. And John says, Mr. Torlian saying, I don't know if it's 40,000 or 100,000, I think that's significant. He doesn't know, well, what is entailed in fixing that intersection and what is the cost. It's true that the city approved his 79E application, but it's also true that there's significant, benefit to him in this project in nearly $300,000 over several years. Is there anything that we could get that should be, improved in that intersection? We're not going to stake our flag and die on it, but it is a failing intersection, and it is of concern to engineering. I don't know if Pete, I don't know if you want to weigh in on any of engineering's perspective on that. We did write in the report, if you don't support the intersection, at least the signs should be improved, but we've talked about it quite a bit.
Are we talking about the driveway entrance?
Driveway,
Yeah,
yeah, signalized, yeah.
I guess we do want something to be done, but like Heather said, it's not something that, it's not the hill we're willing to die on. It's not.
Well put.
It's not a make or break type of an issue for us.
Are there any restrictions regarding the use of that driveway? I mean, if it's only to service a house that's there, that's not even really their property and they own it. I mean, the property owner here doesn't have any use for that. And the only reason he's gonna be pushed for that is because he's the one doing the development, right?
Correct. I mean, it's an access to that benefits Islamic Center. So I wouldn't say that the only ones that use it is that house. They do use it, but it's an access for the Islamic Center. Hence,
Girl, look at all the hands.
Oh, geez, a lot of questions. So if, Mr. Chorlian, if we were to put the requirement that it be improved, could he not just abandon
Right.
that piece of property and then it becomes someone else's problem?
well, if you put the condition on this approval, it goes with this approval. I don't know how, if he'd have done that first, I'm not sure entirely how
Okay.
I'd look at it.
It seems to be a
I
heavy
think
burden.
I think it's something that could be investigated. We don't know, like, what is, I mean, there's already a signal there. There's 3 signals there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just a
one at
matter
Pearl
of-
Street, right?
Yeah, there's one for each direction, and then there's one for the Concord
Ferry.
Center.
Yeah, Ferry Street,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I don't frankly know what's involved or what the cost would be, but it's a question I think we have.
Jeff?
Do we know what the failing condition is? Is it just because that entrance isn't signalized, or is the other parts of the signal failing
Does it say in the
operationally?
engineering report?
No.
Because, I mean, my concern is, you're saying, yeah, it's failing. Well, if it's failing because there's so much traffic on Main Line and people coming up at a Fairley Street that they're not having enough green time, that's not something they're gonna solve by adding that. You're pushing a problem
So
that's.
I don't know why
No,
it's
I'm just,
failing.
I'm talking
I
this through.
don't, I'm being a mouthpiece for.
Right,
our-
and that's what I'm asking, so I wanna be.
It's unfortunate it's not in the engineering report.
Right, so I want to be careful to try and make a motion that says it's got to be fixed when we don't really truly understand the problem.
Yeah.
Putting a stop sign at a signal is allowed by MUTCD, so it's not an illegal condition, it can happen. I think the idea of abandoning the driveway doesn't really work, because there is officially an easement that is granted for access to that
Right.
piece, to the Islamic. So I don't know how that would really work. Whether they're willing to give it up because they have the access on Pearl and they don't really need it, then maybe I don't know if it can be given to the other property somehow, or they get rights, I don't know. But the other properties, whether they have legal
So-
access or not,
So-
it's almost like squatters' rights, they've been using it for how many years, openly and honestly.
Oh, there used to be a business in there that used it a lot.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, at some point, the church knew probably it was happening.
So,
Jim
so,
Stewart.
Jim Stewart, yeah, Jim Stewart.
So in terms, I think,
And Junior.
I think a little bit more has to be looked at as to what's the failing condition, so that
But-
they have some understanding.
Good point. So you're saying that legally they can have a stop sign there at a.
Just like it is today.
Just like it is today.
That is allowed by MUTCD on low-volume driveways coming into an existing signal. Perfect example, East Side Drive where Hazen Drive comes out, there's a house on the opposite side. I don't know that they actually officially have a signal head.
So that.
There's 2 driveways, actually.
There's a
4-car
signal-
accident there today.
But I'm just saying, it may not have had anything to do with that. But what I'm saying is
Okay.
if the traffic's not significantly
Yep.
increasing as a result of this, is the failing condition existing, and is it really the road?
Okay. So,
I think we just we wanted you to discuss that and determine how you felt about it, and then, because there's a either-or situation in the report that says either ask
Yeah, if
him
we
to
don't-
address this,
yeah, then
or
change the
say
signage.
that it should, right, exactly. So if the board feels that that's what they want to do, then just maybe clarify that in your motion.
so you know this business, if you put a stop sign, if you put a signal up, there's probably the right amount of poles that's there to hold the signal, but probably not. So you'd have to
Not in the right locations.
to rejigger them. That's very often
could
not
add-
used, but would you have to put a sensor in?
There is a camera there already. There's a 360-degree camera there, so it's literally going into the controller and drawing a little zone on a video to have it that.
Is that how they do that?
Yeah.
I
The new
thought they
ones
did it
do.
in the
The
street.
old ones used to be. The old ones used to be, well, years ago, they used to be pressure plates.
Yeah.
Then they went to the loops.
Yep.
Now they're video. But anyways, so you could do it with
Something
just
new.
adding signal poles and not having to add a big mast arm
Okay.
on the other side of the road. You could add 2 signal poles. You'd have to add 2 because you're required to have 2 per.
It just seems like a burden that I don't think is
Right,
necessary.
and then you've got all the conduit to get it back to the cabinets and everything.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Three signals in a row, 75 feet apart?
Yeah.
They all
It has
operate
it,
together.
And then
Well, we know what it's like to get,
All right.
Literally, you'd actually, most likely, you'd have it go at the same time Ferry Street does, so you wouldn't introduce a new
Yeah.
phase.
Yeah,
So you wouldn't change how it
okay.
operates. Okay.
All right.
Questions or other
No more.
points, from staff? No?
Well, there's also the North State Washington Street intersection
Yep.
that is being looked at by engineering. We got a memo a couple of weeks back about that. I guess that intersection was looked at a number of years ago, and that operates at a level, LOSC, level of service C, which is kind of like a moderate, but there's one leg of the intersection that is failing. And it was recommended that a signal be put up. I don't know when that was, 5-10 years ago, and the community didn't want it. Now there's gonna be a little bit more traffic added to the intersection, so that's gonna be something that we'd want a decision from the board on, I think.
So run it by me again, so you're talking the intersection on
Washington and North State.
The
So opposite
existing,
Washington.
the existing condition that's there now, right, is a light,
Left and right turn lane.
You're one street
That's
up
a
from Main
stop.
Street. You're at where Washington
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
be
North State meet, one block west of.
oh, one block up?
to the
Right.
west.
Oh, yeah, okay.
To the west,
You know, like.
That should be a roundabout.
Law school.
Oh,
Right.
God.
It's,
Okay, yeah,
Why are we
honestly, I
talking
think
about this?
that's
Yeah.
beyond
Why are we-
this project.
Too late at night to talk about this.
Yeah, so that's
Another
not,
time.
not for us to talk about here, I mean,
Well,
that's,
no, wait, hold on a second. Part of every,
I get
just to
it. No.
clarify,
Yep.
part of every project is to look at that add traffic,
Yep,
and then
yep.
where we scope these
Yep.
traffic studies, is to look at these intersections. When we looked at the casino, we looked at like 5 or 6 intersections, and the recommendations that we made were based on off-site intersections because of the traffic that was added for the project. This traffic study did look at this intersection as part of this project.
Yep.
And determined that there's an existing level C. With the increase in their traffic, it makes that worse, and the recommendation is to signalize it. So I just want to clarify for the board that this, you may decide that that's not something that we want to do or take that step, but is absolutely
It
within the
absolutely is in the-
purview
yep, yep.
of this project because of the traffic added to that intersection from their project.
Yep.
Just to
Okay.
clarify.
Which
'cause
intersection?
We're not just making stuff
on
up.
North State. So,
So this
one
one, that-
block up.
that-
Washington Street, North State.
This one.
Yeah. Coming down from the law school, yeah. Yeah.
Where Waze sends everybody
Yeah.
down Washington Street to catch the light to get to 393. That's the problem.
Because you're, even because
Yeah.
of the employers and
Yeah.
the residents that come
Yeah.
from the hospital,
Yep, come
Yeah.
down that way.
coming down that way,
It's the easiest way.
it's the,
It's the easiest,
the
fastest
easiest
way.
way, but
I go
don't
that
try to
way
do
from
it-
the south end and come down through and cut through there all the
do
time.
not try to do it at 5
Maybe we
o'clock.
should have Langley
All
Parkway.
the time. Yeah, Langley
Well,
Park.
so this is the intersection, I think, in the report. It says that years ago, the community did not want an intersection there
Yeah.
because they thought Langley Parkway
Yeah, would
was
come
going to
and
fix it.
Fix it.
And when Langley Parkway is no longer there, now the question is, well, do they now want it fixed? Is it, you know,
That's a
there's
good
a,
question.
we don't know. Does the community now still not want it, or do they?
Roundabout.
I want a
So
roundabout.
so this study, Heather, correct me. So what is the change in level of service? He's saying C, with their traffic, what does this intersection go to? D?
I
I
don't think that was.
changes that much, does it?
Yeah, it doesn't change it much at all, but I don't think they gave us a letter, Jeff. Did you?
I did, can I come up?
What, yeah,
Yeah, sorry. We did have trip generations done by a traffic engineer. And just to sort of give it some context, the AM peak hour, there are 3 trips entering our site and 9 leaving. And the the PM peak, there are 9 cars entering and 6 cars exiting. So while I understand these intersections see a lot of cars, that's in an hour, by the way. So it's 3 entering the site in an hour, 9 exiting the site in the AM peak. And then the PM peak, it's 9 and 6, 9 entering and 6 exiting. So the exiting doesn't impact this intersection we're talking about at North State and Washington. But the entering our site potentially would, given it's a one-way. So again, the AM peak is 3 cars trips in an hour, and the PM peak is 9
How can
in the
that be
hour.
on 30 apartments?
It's just, it it's because not everyone necessarily leaves during the peak
During the
hour.
peak
Some
hour.
people leave earlier, some people leave then, some people
Some
leave
people don't leave
after.
at all.
Some people work from
Exactly.
home, whatnot. Yeah. So I just wanted to put that into context.
But even 10 people is not that much of a difference to the intersection.
Well, if they're exiting, it's definitely not, because it's one-way street, they make a
Yeah,
left and head
okay.
down.
All right, point taken, thank you.
I don't think we had a recommendation, we were just saying the board should
No.
evaluate it.
Yeah. Okay, so we have in our packets, again, using as a determination of fact, staff reports we received, the testimony we received tonight, and the packet of information that we got from the applicant. We have, to grant, 7.2 is to grant architectural design review approval subject to the conditions that the applicant return to ADR to address review comments and present additional graphics. Any other changes on the ADR piece that we should outline other than the front? I know we talked about the front entrance and the other things that the applicant had brought up. Anything else that I missed? If not, we'll-
Addressing the repeated, not addressing the comments made by staff. It was a
Oh,
repeat.
yeah.
Those should
So-
be addressed.
So, yeah, but again, I think that's in the approval piece, not the ADR piece, right? So when we grant the site plan, it's gotta be that we're addressing all the conditions that are left open with the landscape plan, the technical review comments, and the site layout comments, right? Heather?
Yeah, unless you discuss the ADR, I think had about 3 points, the main entrance, but also where there are stairs being removed by the old tower was another element that part of their recommendation to come back for. That I don't think you might not have touched on it here.
Okay. All right, so would someone like to make a motion to grant architectural design review approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We've got conditional use permits. Zoning variances, all clear? Zoning's, you all clear with zoning? Yeah, okay.
We have our variances. If there was a request for a rehearing, the ZBA will hear that on October 4th.
Okay.
You have the authority.
That doesn't change anything here, okay. Okay, 7.3 is to grant the following conditional use permit CUP, which is per section 28.711A ZO to allow off-site parking, and section 28.711B ZO to allow construction of fewer parking spaces than required. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that conditional use permit as outlined, and then we'll take
So
comments? Motion's been made and seconded. Further discussion? Oh, I thought I heard somebody say something. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 7.3. So 7.4 is to grant major site plan approval for the conversion of a church into a multi-family building to accommodate 30 residential units and associated parking and site improvements, subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions, and those are outlined in precedent conditions 1 through 5, subsequent conditions 1 through 6. Any additional conditions, Heather?
Well, so as we've asked you to make the determinations tonight on several issues that we weren't clear on,
Yep.
I anticipated those decisions in comments 1, 2, and 3. So you should maybe evaluate those conditions to see if that is what you intend.
Precedent conditions 1, 2, and 3?
Continue.
Subsequent conditions 1, 2, and 3, prior to commencement of construction of activity, payment of
No,
inspection.
no, precedent conditions 1, 2, and 3.
Precedent conditions 1 is address review comments to the satisfaction of Planning Division and Engineering Service Division, with the exception of comments pertaining to traffic signalization and sidewalk improvements. Provide traffic signal improvements or signage improvements as determined by the board, so we will need to step back and address that one. And 3 is to provide sidewalk improvements as determined by the board. So again, all 3 of those we talked about internally here. I don't think there's a lot of support for asking them to put a signal in. So I'm inclined to say that provide updated signage for that intersection.
Not sure we really clarified that. There's installation of signal, which was talked about at North State in Washington, but I don't think we ever determined the signal at the driveway on Main Street.
Well, we talked about it, yeah.
Right, but I was asking, what's the failing condition, and is
Yeah.
it really gonna be approved? We don't know that.
Right.
So,
But do we need to even go down that rabbit hole I mean, do we really want to make them go down that rabbit hole to find out what the failing condition is?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't hear anybody say anything. I mean, I was saying sign can be allowed and stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't know that was ever really agreed upon.
Suzanne?
Well, I go down that all the time, and I've never, ever, ever,
I've never seen a
ever,
person
ever-
come out of there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I've
don't think
never
it's a problem.
had a problem with traffic at
So
all.
again, I hear what you're saying, I just don't know that we even need to address it. I get it, I understand why they want to do it, and I understand why that if it's a failing condition, for whatever reason, it should be looked at, but again, I don't know if it's a burden that we need to add to the project.
And I totally agree with you, because if it becomes a problem, then it will be, but we don't even know what the problem really is, so I don't think we can really even make a decision other
So-
than the fact that.
So if we, basically, it's precedent condition one, if we change it to say that we aren't requiring them to do a signalization study or address the concerns, then basically update the signage. Are we okay that way, Heather?
Sure.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay.
So what are you saying
Number
here?
2 wouldn't say.
I'm saying for one, before we move on, I'm saying for one, address review comments to the satisfaction of Planning and Engineering Division to provide for, oh no, that's sidewalk
Yeah.
improvements, I'm sorry.
2 would be, I think, provide signage improvements as determined in discussion with engineering staff.
Okay.
Instead of putting it on us, it's back
Let
to
engineering
satisfy
say
them.
either a stop sign
You
this
do it.
left or right side or whatever it is. Perfect. So you get that,
Got it.
Allison? And then, so back on to number 1,
No change.
no change. And then number 3, provide sidewalk improvements as determined by the board. I just don't,
I don't want.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would just leave the sidewalk alone.
yeah. And I get all the points that Jeff is making, and I understand the
do, but-
ADA piece of it, I understand the snow piece of it, and it is again, maybe Council Pierce's recommendation to give Unitil a call and find out why the poles are in the middle of the damn sidewalk would be a first step, from the applicant's perspective, so.
But should we have, if I may, should we have language that the applicant will clear the sidewalks of snow?
I don't know that we want to open that
Okay.
can of worms up. I mean, the applicant's gonna do it because it's in his best interest, but I don't know that we want to open that up.
Just consider, it was sidewalk on North Main and the sidewalk on Washington Street that
Yeah.
we wanted you to consider both,
Yeah.
not just the Washington Street.
That's a good point, sorry. Good point. The sidewalk on North Main is plowed, though.
No, he's talking about the improvements for the ADA
Oh, the ADA tip
accessibility at
downs,
the
the tip downs on
intersection.
the intersection, yeah.
I mean, is this
Yeah,
something we
again.
should move out a month to allow a little more time for discussion with staff and work
I
that
don't know
through?
I don't know what it buys us at that point, if the applicant doesn't want to do it, and staff is saying they should do it.
So,
Where does our, yeah,
so my question maybe is about what John was talking about, but what the city is going to do.
Yeah.
And when the city is going to do that. Do we have information on that?
What I've been told is probably within the next couple of years, but there's nothing firm. There are no plans. There's nothing
I mean,
on paper that I know of. There's no design.
there's a
Something we'd like
fairly
to do.
steep, there's a fairly steep back down onto Main Street. I mean, if we say build a retaining wall and do this, then the city's gonna come in 2 years and say, well, we're gonna regrade this
Yeah,
all here and here and
exactly.
here, and we're gonna rip out this retaining wall that you just put in. I just,
they spend
until the
money
city
that- yeah.
either does something to the crosswalk, I don't know that we wanna burden the applicant with that type of.
Can they,
I agree.
what about the whole idea of an easement, though? Because if their wall's right on the property line and the curbing's here, curbing can't move because the sidewalk, the road has to be a certain width with the parking and everything. Are they willing to work with us to maybe provide the easement, so in the future, if the city has to come back and does redo that sidewalk, they can move the curb?
I think we
as
let
part
the
of
city
project?
come back and ask the
Okay,
question at
yeah.
that point, once they're ready to do it.
But if they've already built the building and the patio's
It's
right
not
up
gonna change,
against.
yeah, it's not gonna change out there at that point at all, though. The patio's gonna go over existing structure and isn't gonna encumber that area at all. Right? I don't think, Aaron?
I think we're really talking about, at the corner of Washington, Main and Washington, there's a, you see a 1.5 foot of
Yeah.
granite that extends some depth into the ground.
Yeah.
When the grade has to get chased back further to create ADA grades, certainly, presumably that granite does not go deep enough to retain the corner of the yard. So some new retaining structure right at the corner will need to be created. I mean,
I understand that, but like, you're gonna put in those big granite posts and the fence right at back of the existing curb almost according to this plan. So if the city had to come through and wanted to move the curb, your fence is there. Is there any way to set the fence back and, like I say, consider if the city had to come back and move it?
Or are you willing to make changes at that point?
these, believe it or not, these things are pretty easy to remove. I mean, it's a granite cap.
Right, I'm just trying to avoid the city having to be burdening the cost of having to move the fence at that point because it's their
I'll
project.
be delighted. I mean, I own a lot of property and I've developed a lot of property in Concord. I'll be delighted every time the city comes through and makes an intersection, you know, and a sidewalk more accessible. You will not see the owners of this property in any way giving the city a hard time on this. I mean,
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
ADA requirements are pretty strict, whether it's designed and built by the city or the developer. They're gonna be very similar.
Yeah. Okay.
It's gonna have to get done. Sooner or later, it's gonna get done.
Yeah.
It has to.
So then the question becomes, and how far back does it change? How far does the grade change? And what does it affect at the existing structure that he's gonna be putting in? I'd forgotten about the corner, fence posts, but you're right.
So that's what I'm saying, do we?
Yeah.
I don't hate to say it, but do we push it, sorry, Earl, do we push it off a month to give engineering staff time to work with them a little more, look at it?
That doesn't gain us, I don't think that gains us anything, sorry.
I agree. I don't think that we're going to, I think this is a great project. The city is very supportive of it by virtue of the 79E that was presented and approved. So I'm not comfortable having the applicant wait any longer on something that the city may or may not do in the next 2 to 5 years.
Yep.
If we did that, nothing would get built.
That's true. Suzanne?
I always say, cross that bridge when you come to.
I cross that bridge, I agree.
Cross that sidewalk.
All right, so we crossed that sidewalk. So we've addressed all those, 1, 2, and 3. Anything else, Heather, on that? I don't think so.
I think we're good.
All right, so would someone like to make a motion to grant major site plan approval, 7.4 with precedent conditions 1 through 5, subsequent conditions 1 through 6?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That motion carries. For the record, Jeff was a nay on that. Okay, congratulations, thank you very much. Good luck with your project. Feel free to stick around
For the end of the meeting?
to the end of the meeting. So again, other business, 8A, 8B, 8C have all been postponed to the October 18th Planning Board meeting. So that brings us to 8D. Any other business that, so we'll get motions. Can we do them all in one or no?
Sure.
So just need a motion to, at the applicant's request for all of them, to postpone
So moved.
8A,
Second.
8B, and 8C to the October 18th meeting. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That
Move
motion
adjournment.
carries. Any other business to legally come before the board? That's it? All right, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We are adjourned.
Did you close the public hearing?
Thank you very much. Public hearing's closed.
They left.